hard to line things up. Anyways, what was I looking for? Right, the quest list. I forgot which star I am, so I'll just have that open. And we'll start the scary stories. Oh. Right, sword and shield? Yeah, for the moment.
This is part 7 of my American road trip series, in which I'm narrating one scary story from every US state. Be sure to check out all the other episodes in the series after this. Don't worry, they're not in any particular order. Thank you to everyone who sent in their stories so far. Now, get ready as we continue on down Route 66. It was summer in small-town New Mexico. I was about 15 years old at the time, and since school was out, I was doing a few odd jobs around town to earn some money. Mowing lawns, walking dogs.
Alright, hopefully that's a good volume there.
A few bucks, you know.
This should be all new to me.
An older gentleman in his early 70s, Mr. Lesnar. He used to be a teacher at my school, but I hadn't seen him for at least a year.
Ooh.
He was bald, with a big white beard. Put a red suit on the guy, and he could have passed as a mall Santa. I always remembered him as being a nice, friendly guy, so when I bumped into him in town, I asked if there was anything he needed help with. He said there was.
It's probably like less than 2 hours. Isn't really much to catch up on.
Give me $50 if I helped him. When you're 15 years old, having $50 in your pocket feels like being a millionaire. I took him up on it. The next day rolled around, and I went over to Mr. Lesnar's house and knocked on the door. He answered with a smile on his face and invited me inside. First thing that struck me was the stench. His house had that old person smell about it. I didn't know much about the guy, to be honest. I mean, yeah, he used to teach at my school, but all I really remembered about him was how he always wore socks with sandals, and how he always spent every school vacation down in Mexico. I started off by cleaning up in the kitchen. Once I'd finished, Mr. Lesnar told me that he wanted help boxing up some things in the basement. Said he had too much junk down there, and that he wanted to reorganize and get rid
Good
of
memories here.
Told me to start boxing things up, and to come and tell him when I'd finished. There must have been a set of 12 stairs that led down into this strangely large, stale-smelling basement. Mr. Lesnar flicked the light switch.
Oh, I think I just barely did the urgent. That's what it was.
The light bulb illuminated the basement.
Okay.
I grabbed a few folded-up cardboard boxes and made my way down. So, there I was, just boxing all sorts of things up in this grungy basement. Must have spent about 45 minutes down there by myself. While I was working, I happened to lean against a particular spot on the wall. When I leant on it, I came across something odd. A loose panel in the basement wall. Not a broken part of the wall, mind you. I mean, this panel was intentionally loose. Well, curiosity got the better of me, and I started fumbling it. It came right off. Behind the panel was a small compartment. Hidden inside that compartment was a box. It felt like finding a hidden treasure chest. I checked to see if Mr. Lesnar was standing behind me at the top of the stairs. The coast was clear. I knew I probably shouldn't, but I pulled out the box. I lifted off the top, curious to see what the old man was hiding inside. At first, it didn't look like there was much in it. A journal, a few knickknacks, and a small pile of photographs, maybe 10 or 12 in total. I took out the photos. My heart immediately sank after looking at the top one. At first, I could hardly believe the image. It showed Mr. Lesnar with a pistol in his hand, kneeling down next to a dead woman lying in the dirt. Her lifeless eyes were staring into the camera lens. She was clearly Mexican and had obviously been shot. The second photo was almost identical, only this time it was a male who stared lifelessly at the camera. No, this can't be real, I thought. I flicked through all the pictures, every damn one, each one telling the same story. They all showed Lesnar, knelt down next to some bloody human game sprawled out on the ground in front of him.
I think that's annoying to touch the touchscreen for the focus.
I was writing on the backs of all the photos, but it was all in Spanish, and I couldn't make it out. Still, I knew instantly what this was. A box full of sick mementos from Lesnar's trips to Mexico, hidden away from the world in a small wall compartment. In some photos, Lesnar looked younger. In others, he appeared to be in his mid-60s. In all of them, he was kneeling down next to his victims, with the same disturbing grin on his face, posing like a hunter with his trophies. I was overcome by this weird mixture of shock, disgust, anger, and most of all, fear. Fear that I was in the basement of the monster in these photos. Without thinking, I shoved the images back inside the box and slid the container back into the wall.
Okay, sharpener.
I desperately fumbled with the wall,
Polisher.
trying to put it back in the exact same way it was, not wanting the old man to realize that I'd discovered his horrible secret.
I didn't want that.
I got the damn thing back in place.
There we go.
A creaking at the top of the basement stairs behind me. I turned to see old man Lesnar standing by the basement door, looking down at me. I have never felt more like a rat in a cage. "Looks like you're doing a good job," he said. My heart skipped a beat. I just mumbled something and tried to act like nothing was wrong. "Oh, don't mind me. I'm just going upstairs for a nap. You keep on going down there." With that, he slowly turned and walked off through the hallway. There was maybe 20 seconds of silence before I heard his footsteps making their way up the stairs to his bedroom. My mind was racing. Had he seen me fiddling with the panel? Did he know that I'd found his photos? Oh God, was I in danger? I was only a scrawny kid. I decided not to stay down there wondering. I waited for a few moments before bolting up the basement staircase. I dashed towards the front door, grabbed the handle and twisted. No good. The damn thing had been locked from the inside. I figured the old man had just locked it before he went upstairs. I scanned the door to see if there was a way to quickly open it. No time. I could hear movements above me. The old man was walking back out of his bedroom and towards the stairs. I sprinted through the hallway and into the kitchen. I knew from the cleaning earlier there was a back door there. I grabbed the handle and prayed. With a twist, it flung open. It felt like winning the lottery. I flew out of that house, ran around the property and back onto the main street. I looked back only once. When I did, I saw the old man's face in one of the downstairs windows. He looked to be holding something. I was too far away to make out what it was exactly, but I bet you can guess what I thought it was.
A loud car.
I kept on running until I got home, thankful that the old man lived in a cul-de-sac and not in the middle of nowhere. If he did, I'm certain he'd have taken a shot at me. It goes without saying that I told my parents what I'd found. We notified the authorities about
it works out. Thought I had 3.
about the secret panel.
Forgot this is the beginning of the game.
Those in the box. When they checked the place out, they did indeed find the secret compartment. Predictable, it was totally empty. There was no box hidden inside, no evidence of any wrongdoing whatsoever. They figured I was just messing with the old guy or something, and decided not to look into him any further. I don't know what Lesnar did with the pictures, whether he destroyed them or hid them elsewhere, but he got away with it all regardless. Old man Lesnar lived another 8 years after that. In that time, I graduated high school, went off to college, and moved out of town. My parents always lived in that same place, however. For all the time I lived there after that incident, and whenever I'd go back to visit my parents, I'd always be looking over my shoulder. I knew that Mr. Lesnar wanted to take his secret to the grave, and I always worried that he'd try and silence me to do so. It's hard to believe there are people like this, who, to the outside world, are leading seemingly ordinary lives. I'm glad I didn't become his last trophy. This next entry actually comes from one of my earliest videos, but I've always considered it to be one of my favourite stories, and I've wanted to redo it for a long time. Here it goes. During the midsummer, usually around the middle of July, me and a few of my good friends, Ryan, Kevin and Tommy, always made time to go up to Kev's family cabin, located on Vermilion Lake, way up north in the forests of Minnesota. Throughout all of our young years, we would always be accompanied by Kevin's dad, and sometimes a few of our dads as well. Once we were juniors in high school, however, we felt mature enough to go to the cabin on our own, finally without Kevin's dad or any other adult supervision. My friend's cabin was very remote and very little, based upon a large island. Other cabins were on the island, but the next one closest to us was a solid half-mile away at least, and you could only get to it by taking a man-made path around the island. I want to mention that to get to my friend's cabin, you had to park on a gravel road on the opposite side of the island and take his boat across the lake about a half-mile. Vermilion Lake is huge. My mind always had a tendency to run around while I was sleeping. The cabin was all on one level, with only 2 bedrooms next to one another, a kitchen and living room area connected to them, and a bathroom in the back of the cabin. And there was always one window in each of the rooms with no curtains to them at all, so it was very easy to see outside to the woods and lake. And this is where my mind would run, as I always thought about someone peering in. And they never were, of course. I had been to the cabin about a dozen times during my lifespan, and nothing bad ever happened. So the older I got, the easier it was to sleep. Now for the event. On this particular trip, we planned to stay around 5 nights. On the 3rd night during the trip, when we were finally on our own, we had set up a campfire and had been drinking beers all night. I don't condone underage drinking, but being the rebels we were, we just so happened to sneak some. We went out to the dock to stare up at the magnificent stars and enjoy our buzz, when all of a sudden, we heard something out on the water that sounded like a fish jumping out to catch a bug. We quickly looked over at the lake, wondering where the splash came from, our fishing poles at the ready. Thankfully, the moon was out that night, which lit up the lake. Without it, it would have been pitch black, what with there being no city lights for miles upon miles. I began to point out to something. Guys, what the hell's that? After looking closely, and finally spotting what he was pointing at, the only way I can describe it is it simply looked like a head floating out in the middle of the lake, staring at us directly. It was about 3/4 worth of a football field out in the lake from the dock. It had long, black hair, and a very pale, skin-like face, but I couldn't make out the eyes, mouth, nose or chin, as if it was just a blob of pale skin with long black hair over it. I'll never forget that feeling that came over me. The hairs on my legs, neck and arms all stood up, and I felt paralyzed on the inside and ready to go home at that moment. We told ourselves it was just a loon. Those birds are very popular night drifters on the lake, and they do their hunting late. And it was possible that a loon all of a sudden popped up in the water after hunting for a bit. At least, we tried to convince ourselves of that scenario. All of us had the creeps. And that damn thing wasn't moving one bit, just treading water in the same place. We went back to our campfire, lit it even brighter, and headed inside to drink more. We soon forgot about the headlight thing with the help of the beer. That is, until I had to use the bathroom really bad, and the one inside was preoccupied. I went outside to do my business, seeing how we were in the great outdoors. Whilst taking a pee and glancing at the beautiful moonlit lake, I noticed that the black, circular object was still there, but about 30 yards closer now, still looking as if it was staring right up at me. I could easily see the nose on this thing's face. Again, it was very pale, like it hadn't seen the sun for years.
It's taking a lot longer than it should.
An uneasy feeling came over me, and I immediately went back inside and told my friends to come and look. They all came outside to see it still there, looking at us as if the head was corked up and its chin was in the air. Nobody dared go down to the dock anymore, and we immediately went back inside, deciding it probably wasn't a loon. For a loon to stay in the same spot for almost an hour or two made no sense to any of us. This head-like object was stiff as a ball and not moving a single muscle, just staring up at us from the deck. There was no ripple effect from it at all. He said it was just a lock and went back inside. I could tell everyone else felt uneasy too. A few hours passed. It was super late into the night at this point, and we all knew we needed sleep. Being my curious self, I looked back outside one last time, and the black object had completely vanished. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, thinking the log must have floated off or just hit shore somewhere else. There was no AC in the cabin, and we had to open the windows, or else we'd fry in the middle of summer. Me and Tommy slept in the living room, while my two other friends slept in the two bedrooms with their doors open. Not being able to sleep, but keeping my eyes shut, I began to hear someone walking around outside at the bottom of the stairs to the cabin. I thought I was about to have a heart attack. No question that whoever or whatever I heard down there was on the deck, pacing back and forth, their feet flicking on the wood. It was as if they weren't sure what to do with themselves.
You know, like that.
It lasted for about 3 minutes. I wanted to whisper to my buddy, but was frozen in fear. I just kept my eyes shut and my ears on full alert. The footsteps sounded like they took 2 rapid steps up the deck stairs all of a sudden, but then turned around and sounded like they were sprinting away down the man-made path. After it sounded like the steps were long gone and a couple of minutes had passed, I woke up Tommy and asked him if he'd heard the steps.
Finally.
We both sat up and were startled by Ryan walking out of his room and saying, "We need to leave, now." And there was something very disturbing about his expression. I asked him why. He woke up Kevin in the other room. "Come on, get to the boat. It's time to go." "What? Ryan, what the hell's wrong with you?" Kevin asked. Ryan explained to us quickly while grabbing his stuff. I'll never forget what he told us, nor will my other friends. He said that when he was turning sides on his bed to get more comfortable, he saw someone peeking in at the top right corner of the window. The figure quickly shifted out of his view. He said all he saw was one eye, ghostly white skin, and long black hair down the window. When looking back at what he experienced, it chills us to the bone to realize that since this face was in the top right corner of the window in my friend's room, it was either damn near 8 foot tall, standing on something like bricks trying to peek in, or was floating. Tommy and I told the others what we'd heard outside the cabin, absolutely disturbed the hell out of our minds, and feeling like we were going to be sick. We all packed up our stuff and booked it, not cleaning the cabin or anything. We locked up, and as we headed down the stairs, we saw bare footprints in the dirt, heading off along the path and all around the cabin. We picked up our pace, made it to the boat, not knowing what was watching us or around us, threw our stuff in the boat, untied it, and sped off. I didn't even think about the head in the water. My eyes were just glued to the island, trying to spot anything moving. I saw nothing. When we finally got our stuff packed in the car, we hopped inside and took off. We drove for about 10 miles, when, out of the blue, Ryan all of a sudden broke down in the car, sobbing, saying things like, "What was it, guys? What was it? Oh God, what did I see?" We called to tell our parents what had happened on the way back, told them that Ryan was freaking out. They said to just get home safely, quickly. It was late, about 4 or 5 in the morning, but no one slept. It was a very quiet ride home. My friend's dad, who owns the cabin, went up that following weekend. Said he didn't experience anything weird while there, but did mention that the bare footprints were still lingering about. That bugged him badly. What Ryan saw in the window really hit him hard. After
Just gotta run away from it.
Sleeping for multiple nights, and ended up having to seek help for a couple of weeks and hop on some sleeping medicine. As time went on, he ended up being fine, but isn't too comfortable sleeping next to a window without a curtain. To this day, I can't explain what happened, nor why it seemed to happen to us. Nothing has ever happened at that cabin since that night, so we're told by Kevin's dad at least. I personally have never gone back to the cabin.
Bit greedy.
It really makes me sad, because I have some great childhood memories from there. Tommy and Kevin have both been back and been fine, but Ryan refuses to ever set foot there again, and I'm with him. A lot of people have cabins on that island, so it could have been a prank in the making, and Ryan busted it when he saw the person in the window. It could also have been a person wanting to do something worse to us. I'll never be able to explain what was floating in the lake, but the fact that that incident, along with the footprints and someone looking in at Ryan, all happened in the same night, seems like more than a coincidence to me. I was out hiking in Morgan Monroe State Forest with my girlfriend one afternoon. It was a nice day, and the insects and birds were chirping away. Out of nowhere, the pair of us heard what sounded like 3 gunshots, one after another. They went off not too far down the trail. We looked at each other. A few seconds of silence. Then another 3 shots. "Is that gunfire?" my girlfriend asked me. I nodded, unable to think what else it could be out here. We decided to turn back, not wanting to chance running into some
you die already. There we go.
What struck me at that moment was the lack of any kind of sound coming from the woods. After the shots rang out, there wasn't any kind of nature sound at all. I mean, I get that the birds might have been scared away, but even the insects had fallen silent. We were both getting some weird vibes. The situation just felt unnatural. In amongst all the surreal silence, we heard one thing just behind us. Footsteps snapping on twigs. We turned to see who was following us. I half expected to see a hunter with a rifle. I was wrong. Moving down the trail towards us was this thing. A humanoid figure that obviously wasn't human. It was like looking at a living silhouette. Even in the light, it looked like it was hiding in the darkness. The thing just looked like a shadow. That's the best way I can describe it.
Oh, that's scary.
Sunlight just wasn't hitting it for some reason. From its outline, it looked to just be skin and bones. And it was tall. Real tall. At least a foot larger than me, and I'm not a small dude. I'd scarcely believe I'd even seen the thing had my girlfriend not been there as well. It was walking in long strides, gaining a lot of distance with each step. Needless to say, we bolted back the way we came. I've no idea if that thing pursued us or not. We were both too terrified to turn back and look. We made it back to our vehicle and hiked
Well, that sucked.
not stopping for anything. We've never been back to Morgan Monroe since. Unless the both of us momentarily lost our minds at the exact same time, then there's something out in those woods, and neither of us plan on going back to find out what it is.
I want to go to Switch X. I don't know really.
So, near where I live, but a little farther out in the sticks, there's a glorified gravel path in the woods called Rube Hill. It runs maybe 3 miles long, and only half a mile of it's paved. On the south end is the pavement, with a few old but otherwise normal houses dotted around it. Deceptively average at that point. Then, the houses end, the pavement ends, and the gravel road shoots up a steep hill. It's not taken care of at all. The gravel's piled up in potholes and berms, so unless you're driving a nice off-road vehicle, you'd want to take it easy. Since you'd need to drive slowly, you'd get a nice view of the handmade signs nailed to trees with messages like, "No trespassing," and "We're watching you," scrawled in Sharpie. At the top of the hill, the road winds lazily for a little under a mile.
I want something
before
different. I
diving
haven't used
back
Stripey in a
to the
long
side of
time.
the hill. The gravel is in equally crappy condition on this side. After you reach the bottom of the hill, the road cuts straight for about a mile through cornfields before intersecting with another road. The The reason I'm so familiar with the layout is that I've taken friends out on late night drives along this road to scare the bejesus out of them. Never an elaborate prank. I'd just drive slowly and play creepy music to get them amped up and paranoid. I always made sure to tell them about the meth heads and their labs out there, and how the sheriffs try to avoid going there because it's dangerous. I figured it was all hogwash, just stories, you know. But now I think there's an element of truth to some of those rumors. I was with my friend Aaron one night, and we decided to go on a late night drive along Rube Hill to freak ourselves out. We took off, drove down the various country highways and back roads, and turned onto Rube Hill. I made sure to play extra creepy music, since Aaron and I had made the trip many times before. It honestly lost a lot of its creepy luster on me, but I still enjoyed the long drives and scaring my friends. Of course, the drive mostly went by uneventful, and we were almost across the hill, about to descend the other side. That's when Aaron started freaking out. I checked my mirrors to see what had spooked him so much, and saw truck headlights down the road behind us. They seemed to be back where the road first topped the hill. The truck made it under the only streetlight on the top of the hill, a really dim orange light, and I could see it was kicking up a ton of dirt. It was speeding towards us. I paused the music we were playing, and sure enough, with the windows down, I could hear the gravel crunching and flying, like the vehicle was speeding. Keep in mind that I've driven this road dozens of times, both during the day and at night, and not once have I ever encountered another vehicle. So, having a truck speeding to seemingly catch up to us at midnight on a road supposedly filled with rumoured junkheads was pretty jarring. Usually, I don't relinquish my brakes driving
Careful,
back.
please.
This time, I didn't even touch them. Thankfully, we got home safe and sound. The next day, I'm hanging out with one of my other friends, Chris. Chris and I are lounging around, playing video games, talking about quantum physics, Chris's favourite thing, and
Yes, of
Chipotle,
course.
my favourite thing. I, of course, told him about Aaron and I being chased, and I kind of hammed it up, made it come across more harrowing than it really was. Now Chris wanted to go to the road, so we waited until late at night, about 2 AM, and drove out to Rube Hill. This time I wasn't playing any music. I wanted to be alert. It was all going quite normally, just like usual, when I slammed on my brakes. I threw the car in park and turned to Chris. Oh, dude, you can see that too, right? Chris was just as confused as me. He looked at me and nodded. My headlights were clearly illuminating a thick metal cable stretched across the road in front of us. On the right, it was wrapped around a tree at roughly head height for an adult, and it was pulled taut across the road, anchored to a fence post on the left at roughly chest height. We were both sitting there, wondering what to make of it, when we heard gravel being thrown by tires behind us. I checked my mirrors, and sure enough, truck headlights were tearing arse down the road. I started freaking out. My breathing and heart rate were out of control, and I began sweating. Chris just swore quietly under his breath. I threw it into drive, pulled as far to the right as I could, and my low-sitting car slid under the cable with a loud metal-on-metal scraping noise.
Oof.
I cringed as I heard the scrape, but I wasn't about to sit there and get deliveranced. So again, I flew down the hill, and this is the creepy cherry on the sundae for me personally, because Chris didn't see it. As we left the tree line and entered the cornfields, I glanced to my right, past Chris, and briefly caught a glimpse of somebody standing about 3 or 4 feet back in the corn. I just felt my stomach scrunch up, and I floored the accelerator. I glanced in my rearview mirror and could see a man standing in the road behind us, illuminated by the moon and my taillights. He had a long object slung over his shoulder. I couldn't tell if it was a cane or maybe a rifle.
Remember.
I stayed to find out. Before I could even tell Chris about it, we were around a bend and out of sight. That car had a scrape mark on the roof the rest of the time I owned it. It was a good reminder of why I never went out to that road again. In the middle of summer last year, my best friend Roberto and I went hiking in the woods in the Richmond area of Virginia. We got up before sunrise and packed our backpacks with food, water and energy drinks. He was training to go into the Marine Corps, so this was one of many exercises I did alongside him to help him get in shape. We got to the state park right at sunrise and were the first ones there. Our goal that day was to hike 14 miles from one trailhead to the other, so we dropped his car off at the far trailhead and parked mine at the trailhead that we began at. The sun was already up by the time we got moving along the dirt trail that hugged the banks of the lake. Even under the shade of the canopy, it was still brutally hot and humid. We were drenched in sweat by the time we reached the mile mark. Aside from the humidity, it was a great hike. That is, until we reached mile 9 and saw this middle-aged white woman holding a small dog in her arms, standing in the middle of the trail ahead of us. Roberto turned off his Bluetooth speaker, and we could hear that the lady was crying. She noticed we were there and began walking briskly back towards us. "Please wait, I really need help." We could see that she was soaked in sweat and had obviously been crying for a while. "Please help me, I'm lost and it's so hot out here." Her poor little dog was panting like crazy, and I noticed she didn't have any supplies with her. I pulled out my water bottle and began pouring some onto a leaf. The little dog drank it immediately. I offered the woman some of the water as well, but she politely refused. After talking with her for a couple of minutes, she told us that she had parked her vehicle on the other side of the trail from where we had started, and that she had walked for only a mile. We told her that she was about 5 miles away from where she claimed to have started. She kept repeating that she was too tired to keep walking, and that she was worried for her dog. Roberto pulled out his cell phone and called the ranger
add up
station.
here.
He explained the situation and our location to the ranger who answered, and the ranger said that they would come by boat and pick her and her dog up. We walked towards the bank of the lake to wait for them. This is where things started getting weird. The lady's exhausted demeanor vanished, and she became very animated. She was saying that she was so thankful for our help, and that she wanted to repay us. We told her that was unnecessary, and we're just glad that we could help her out.
Bye.
She then asked if she could give us a hug. I told her sure, just to be nice. It was strange, and I did get a weird vibe from her, yet I didn't want to be rude. Roberto, on the other hand, told her no, and used the excuse that he was too sweaty for hugs. That's when the lady's good mood came to a screeching halt. You'd have thought that he cussed her out or something. She stopped talking and just stared at him with this sinister look. Then she began talking solely to her dog, saying things like, "Don't say another word to them. We don't like them anymore." Roberto and I just looked at each other, a little freaked out. We could see the small motor-powered John boat approaching with 2 rangers in it. We waved them down and waited in silence until they pulled up along the shoreline. The lady walked towards them and handed them her dog, then turned around and gave us the most evil look imaginable. The park rangers helped her into the boat and waved goodbye to us. She just sat with her back to us as they began gliding along the water towards the entrance that she parked at. Roberto and I laughed it off. Like, what a weirdo, we thought. We helped her and were nothing but nice to her, and she gets all mad at us for Roberto not giving her a hug? Unbelievable. We finished our 5 remaining miles and arrived at Roberto's car in the parking lot. When we got close to his car, we could see that there were dents all over the hood that weren't there before.
Right.
He began running towards his car in rage when, from behind a picnic area, that lady we helped earlier appeared. She came running at Roberto with a goddamn hammer in her hand. She got right up close to him and started swinging. Luckily, she missed, and he caused her to trip when he moved to avoid her. We then held her down and called 911. When the cops arrived, she started yelling about how we were hurting her and told them to shoot us. They came over and took her away. We had to write up incident reports for the cops and recount everything that happened. As it turns out, this woman had broken into her ex-husband's new family's apartment and stolen their dog the night before. The crazy part is, one of the cops responding to the situation said it was his cousin, and that she had just posted a video of us on Facebook Live while we were walking back to Roberto's truck. In the live video, she was whispering repeatedly, "I'm gonna kill them." Her ex-husband saw the Facebook Live video and called the cops on her that very moment. The cop said she used to be a normal lady who worked in the school system until she snapped and became this demon-like person.
Bouncing is fun. Eh. Seriously?
Hey guys, so Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening.
Do it again and dare you.
Huge shout out to Anthony Salinas for making the thumbnail for this video. Make sure to check him out via the links in the description down below. Tell him Lazy sent you. So yeah, I totally forgot to celebrate my 4th year anniversary on YouTube. So no fireworks this year, unfortunately, but maybe I can think of a special topic for the next video. Who knows? If you have any ideas, let me know. As always, a huge shout out to my supporters on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters. Anime Whip, Crazy Mask Parade, James Laver, John Crouch, Procupidine Netta, Gina Valera,
I pressed R.
Westra,
Head not
Alex Greensall,
actually.
Monica Mendoza, Scion of the Emperor,
Okay.
Crawford K. McDonald, Marley Wright, Ray Price Burton, Nadine, Charles Wilson, Mitchell Allen Herrera, Sloane Crawford, Andrew Romans, Samuel Cotton, Kat Mayers, Sarah Ramirez, Victor Javier Fonseca Ruiz,
Probably like
Maricruz.
get to the next one.
Thank you
I
very
hope.
much.
There we go. Don't need Patreon needs being read out, especially if they're not my own Patreons. For today.
This is part 8 of my American road trip series, in which
Trying
I
to switch
narrate
there.
one scary story from every
America
place.
doesn't exist.
A huge thank you to all of the people who sent their stories in so far. We've already covered a lot of ground on our journey, but we're not at the finish line just yet. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the horror as we continue on down the highway.
What are you doing?
At the time of this story, I was a 23-year-old woman living in Charleston, South Carolina. I know the way I phrase that makes it sound like I'm not a woman anymore. I am, but this is my story. I worked as a paralegal at one of the small law firms in town. 5 days a week during my lunch hour, I'd head off to the same Starbucks near my workplace to grab a coffee. My job was actually pretty repetitive, and so was my lunchtime routine. Most people's are, I suppose. And that's why I'd always see the same faces in the coffee shop, day in and day out. It was like a little microcosm. The same baristas were always there too.
Get out of here.
One guy who worked
Tiny
there,
little crepes.
according to his tag, his name was Randall. He was about 6 foot tall, average build, had very short, ginger hair. A crew cut, I guess you'd call it. No Prince Charming, but not entirely unattractive either. Just a guy who kind of blended in. You know how at Starbucks they ask for your name to write on the cups? Well, the first few times Randall took my order, he asked me for mine. Stephanie, I'd say. He saw me so frequently that I guess he just committed my name to memory after that. Every day I'd approach the counter, and every day Randall would take my order. No name required. He'd just jot it down on the cup without asking. After a couple of weeks of this, however, Randall started flirting with me, I suppose. Not verbally, but through his writing on the cup. He started drawing little hearts over the eye in my name, and sometimes even drew some after my name as well. Bear in mind, I'd never actually spoken to this guy. Well, other than giving him my order. No friendly chit-chat or anything. I mean, I was flattered and all, but I wasn't interested. The strange part is every time I went in, he had never tried to talk to me more than just taking my order, and never addressed the fact that he was adding these flirty touches to his writing. In fact, he never showed any kind of emotion on his face whatsoever. No eyebrow movement. Kind of a robotic guy. You'd have thought this was his build-up to asking me out or something. But no, he just acted professional at the counter, and never said anything apart from, "What would you like?" and "That'll be $50." Despite that, he kept on adding the little hearts every time he wrote my name down. And over time, he even started adding little kisses after my name. It made things a little uncomfortable for me, but maybe he was just a little odd in the head, and did this to regular customers too. I just accepted it and ignored it. That is, until the day he added his phone number to the cup, along with a little winky face drawn next to it, with a speech bubble saying, "Call me." I immediately went back to Randall at the counter, and quietly and politely turned him down, letting him know that I was flattered, but that now wasn't really a good time for me. Just a little white lie. Like always, his face remained neutral, no emotional response at all. He simply said, "Okay," and averted his eyes. It was very awkward. I usually take my coffee to go, but that particular day, I really speedwalked out of there. From then on, I considered going somewhere else for my coffee. But to be honest, I really liked what I got from Starbucks, and the only other one nearby was an extra 10-minute walk away. I figured we were both adults. The situation didn't need to be awkward, so I kept going back there. Randall remained stony-faced as always. Luckily, the love hearts on the coffee cup stopped after that, and things went back to being normal. Time passed, and one weekend, I agreed to go on a lunch date with another guy I met. We both had super busy schedules, but worked near each other, and had the same time slots for lunch, so it made sense for us to have a mini 1-hour coffee and conversation.
Parting sucks.
We agreed that the Starbucks would be a nice, casual spot. I forgot to consider the whole Randall situation entirely. I got there, and the guy I'm meeting's already found a table. I go over and give him a hug. He asks me what I'd like to drink, and like a gentleman, goes up to the counter to order. I sit, waiting at the table. When he comes back with the coffees, my date says to me, "Damn, the guy who took my order has a real attitude problem." I turn to see who he's talking about. Standing by the register, glaring at the both of us, was Randall. He had a look of intense anger on his face, like a person who's just been betrayed. And this was the only time I'd ever seen any kind of emotion from the guy at all. Yeah, he didn't even ask me what I wanted, just stared at me angrily and snatched the money right out of my hand. Some people, huh? Annoyingly, we couldn't take our coffees to go, as they came in mugs and not takeout cups. And we just sat there, trying to have a normal date. All the while, Randall continued to glare at us from the counter, only looking away briefly when someone came up to order. After the most awkward date of my life, thanks to Randall, the two of us got up, said that we're being and back to our respective workplaces.
Bouncing.
I'd like to say that Randall was just an awkward and harmless guy. I'd like to say that this is where the story ends. But on both counts,
Usually never is. Went beyond it, stories was normal.
Watching TV, thinking about work, my awkward date, the bills I had to pay, life in general. All of a sudden, there's a frantic knocking on my front door. I got up and peered through the peephole. On the other side was Randall.
Is he in there with you?
What the hell? What was he doing here? Better question, how did he know where I lived?
I know you're in there. I know he's there too. Well, answer me.
I was terrified and confused. Randall, what on earth are you talking about? Go away! The door handle rattled as he tested it from the other side. Luckily, I'd locked the thing when I got home. Then, slam. He threw the full weight of his body against my door. The psycho was trying to break in. Another slam, and then another. My door bounced with every thud against it. From there, autopilot took over me. I grabbed a knife from my kitchen area and ran into the bathroom at the other end of my apartment. I locked myself in there and called the cops. From all the noise he was making, I'm sure a few of my neighbors did too. None of them came out to stop him though, and I can't say I blame them. Randall was slamming on my front door for a good 10 minutes before he gave way. Luckily, it was quite sturdy, and he was no superstar athlete. I could hear him in my apartment, and I tried to muffle my feeling as I hid in my locked bathroom. Thankfully, the police arrived shortly after he broke in. I could hear them telling him to freeze. But when my heart really sank, when it really hit the floor, was when I heard one of the officers shout something I didn't expect to hear. Drop the weapon. As it turns out, Randall had come with a gun in his hand. Before coming to my place, he'd broken into another house in a different part of Charleston. Namely, the house of my date from earlier. He'd smashed a window, crawled inside, and trashed the place. Didn't take anything, but he didn't go there to steal. Luckily, my date wasn't home that night. He was out with his buddies. Randall then came to my place, thinking that was where my date was. He figured we were an item. Turns out Randall had been stalking me for months, always keeping his distance, watching from the shadows. He'd become obsessed. Because I lived such a routine existence and I was so predictable, it was easy for him to track me. He followed me on his time off, and, by his own admission, would stand outside my apartment complex at night, looking up at my window, thinking about coming up to surprise me. Before that night, he decided that would be too creepy. At least he had some sense, I guess. Randall got time. 5 years for his threatening behavior. Not long enough in my book, but at least I won't be seeing him at Starbucks anymore. I also got a restraining order for when he gets out, and switched firms and apartments to keep him from finding me. Still, what if my date had been home that night? What if the police didn't arrive as quickly as they did? I'm not sure I want to know the answers to those questions. He never actually hurt anyone, and the prosecutors couldn't prove that he had evil intent, so I can kind of understand why the judge gave him such a short sentence. But I know in my heart that he came to kill.
Yeah, I mean, you only had a weapon.
Is to never see Randall again.
Dang it, why is he here? We're gonna go to 3.
I used to live in a pretty old house in Wichita. A lot of strange happenings went on, and I'm not sure if they're related to this incident or not.
For him to sleep.
Especially at night, we'd hear what sounded like static voices whispering down the hallway, creaking footsteps in the rooms above us, and see brief shadowy outlines of people moving in the corners of our eyes. We chalked it up to the house just being old, and our paranoid brains making us see things that weren't really there.
Hopefully that's good.
In said house, there was a spare bedroom in the attic that we never really used. My wife and I didn't have any kids, still don't, and we never had any guests who needed to come and spend the night, so the room remained mostly empty. We didn't have much stuff at the time, so we didn't need to store anything up there either. My wife always thought about turning the space into a little hobby room. Now that might sound like a good decision to most of you, but I personally was against that. You see, the attic always had a weird effect on me. I never liked to go up there. Every time I did, I'd get these weird, electric sensations, like the air around me was static, if that makes sense. And it's hard to properly articulate. There was something really off about the whole space, and I'd get uncomfortable just being up there. There was a small crawl space at the bottom of the leftmost wall, and that crawl space always freaked me out in particular. It was only a small hole that went back into the wall, and barely enough space for a human to squeeze into it.
Gosh.
Whenever I'd go near it, the strange static sensations would intensify. Just looking at the thing gave me a headache. My wife, on the other hand, never noticed anything strange about the attic. And unfortunately for me, in this relationship, what she says goes. So I guess I was going to have to turn it into a hobby room. One night, I went up into the attic alone to start clearing some things out of it. Get it ready for the transformation, so to speak.
Sure, please.
The air up there felt static and unsettling as always. It was past sundown by that point, so the one small roof window wasn't letting in any light. I flicked the light switch, for a brief moment, the room illuminated. It stayed light, just long enough for me to get fully up into the room. Then, the light bulb started to dim. The brightness of the light just became lesser and lesser, to the point where I couldn't see anything at all. After a few seconds, the bulb went completely out. Ah, damn. Gonna have to replace that, I thought. That could wait. I clambered back down the ladder, back down from the darkness of the attic, rummaged through a drawer in my bedroom, and pulled out a flashlight. I climbed back up into the blackness and switched the device on. Bright light came shining out of it. Then, the strangest thing happened. After maybe 2 or 3 seconds of being on full beam, the flashlight began to fade. Its light became dimmer and dimmer, and within a matter of seconds, the batteries had completely run out of juice. That was a strange coincidence.
So tired of yellow sharpness.
More than that, I thought. Back down the ladder I scampered. I rummaged through my drawers again and pulled out 4 fresh batteries. I reloaded the flashlight with 2 of them and stuck the other 2 in my pocket. I climbed back up into the attic. Click. I switched on the flashlight again. And again, it lit up the room in front of me in a cone of light. After maybe 2 or 3 seconds, that light started to get weaker. After 10 seconds, the flashlight was dead again, leaving me in total darkness.
Phew.
Up in the attic all by myself.
Nice cinematic finisher right there.
I became more aware of that oppressive, electrical quality. I quickly fumbled with the bottom of the flashlight, unscrewing it until it finally came loose. The 2 batteries inside fell out onto my hand. God damn, they were boiling hot, to the point where they actually felt like small blocks of fire on my palm. I dropped them instantly and began stuffing in the other 2 batteries I brought along. I managed to get them in without too much hassle and flipped the switch on the device once again. Out poured the light, and I did a quick 360 to check my surroundings. I soon calmed myself down, seeing that everything was as it should be, and shone my flashlight at the ground where the 2 hot batteries had fallen. They were lying right next to the crawl space. The static sensation became more noticeable as I bent down to pick them up. And lo and behold, the damn flashlight in my hand began to lose power once again. That was it, I thought. I was just gonna scoop up the fried batteries if they weren't too hot, and get the hell down from there. As I got to the ground, the light from my flashlight was at about half strength. Now, at eye level with the crawl space, the electricity in the air felt stronger than it ever had before. A strange compulsion took me, and I turned to look into the crawl space, and shone the fading light of my torch into it. Staring back at me were 2 black eyes. I only caught sight of whatever it was for a moment, but it was human-shaped, and lying on its stomach, twitching, with long, black hair running down the sides of its chalk-white face. It looked both human and non-human at the same time. It wore no clothes, but I couldn't tell you if it was male or
Interesting game bully this shit me.
Terror and disgust hit me all at
Bunch of
once as my
trolls.
flashlight ran
He's in
out,
higher elo than I am.
leaving me once again in darkness, only this time with this thing right next to me. I jumped up and hurried back down the ladder, back out of the attic. Above me, I could hear it moving, first from what sounded like within the walls of the attic, and then from what sounded like the roof. That didn't make any sense. The crawl space didn't lead to the roof. Soon, the noises were gone.
Fruit
I
bomb.
ran downstairs to tell my wife she needed to leave at once. She looked at me in total confusion. She hadn't heard a damn thing. I explained to her as best I could, told her what I'd seen in the crawl space. She just laughed at me, told me I'd just seen a rat. That thing was no rat. After that incident, I never had the same
See what I could do
strange
with this.
static feeling when I went into the attic. The electricity in the
Yeah,
air that I'd
wasting
noticed
money.
for so long disappeared overnight. All the weird happenings around my home stopped as well. There were no more weird noises, no unusual shadows or creaks, and that crawl space, it returned to just being a regular hole in the wall. Nothing strange or unexplainable happened for the rest of the time I lived in that house. Maybe the whole incident was simply a brain spasm. You know, I could accept that. Maybe I just lost my mind for a few minutes. Sure, it's possible. but I know my wife's suggestion that it was just an animal is complete baloney.
It's all good
I've
though.
only looked at the thing for a second or two, but I'll never forget what it looked like. It was damn near human. I have no idea what the static quality in the air was, nor why I was the only person who ever noticed it. But whatever that creature was in the crawl space, it took the static with it when it left.
That's a good one, Escort. Can we get Bulido right now?
Before I start this story, I think it's important to note that I'm a female.
Alabama one.
I just finished up university in my home country and decided to go to the USA for a bit of soul searching. I was making my way around the country, doing my best to spend a little time in every state. I just got to Alabama, and since I was new to the state, I had no friends or connections there. Thankfully, when I went out to one of the bars in town,
Empty
I
Island.
happened to meet a couple of other women who were extremely friendly and welcoming. Their names were Ava and Mary. Now, I'm originally from Sweden, and they were really curious about my country. They asked me tons of questions about what it was like, and told me how they wanted to go traveling one day too. They were honestly just really great people, so we ended up spending a lot of time at the bar together. Hearing that we were having so much fun, a fourth lady approached us. Her name was Madeline. Madeline said that she was alone that night, since her new boyfriend was working the late night shift. Said that she didn't have anybody to hang out with. Since the three of us seemed so friendly, she thought she'd ask if she could drink with us. Obviously, we said yes. Luckily, she was just a nice, normal, friendly girl too. So, there we all were. Two old friends and two complete strangers, laughing and joking about anything and everything that popped into our minds. It got late, and eventually, it was closing time at the bar. Madeline, the woman who came over and joined the three of us, drunkenly suggested an idea. Hey guys, my boyfriend just arrived to pick me up. We're actually going to another party on the other side of town. It's gonna be a crazy night. You guys wanna join us? 5 seats, 5 people. Well, Ava and Mary really wanted to keep the party going, and they both excitedly accepted the offer. Seeing how I was having such a great time and feeling a little tipsy, I was honestly tempted to join them too. And that's when the adult part of my brain activated and told me that it wouldn't be such a good idea to
Oof,
go.
this part is pretty rough right here.
I was in a new country, a new state, a new town. Yeah, technically, these people were complete strangers. I decided it was time for me to call it a night. With a
Guessing
heavy
things are
heart,
loading.
I said goodbye to my new friends and wished them a good night. Thankfully, my hotel was only a few minutes walk away. I woke up the next morning with a major headache, but I thank my lucky stars that I went home that night, because it could have ended so much worse. Over the next couple of days, I heard the news of what happened to Ava and Mary after they got into that car. They were both found on the side of the road, 7 miles apart from one another, both of them drugged, robbed, and beaten to the point of near death. Other things had also been done to them, though even writing those down for this story would turn my stomach too much. I'm sure you know what I'm referring to. They were found just after sunrise, and had probably been lying there for hours. They were both rushed to the hospital for treatment, and once they were conscious again and able to talk, they were questioned about what happened to them. Unfortunately, they remembered absolutely nothing. They'd been filled with so many chemicals to make them obedient that they couldn't remember anything from that night. Not going to the bar, meeting me, not even what Madeline looked like, let alone the boyfriend. I have no doubt this incident must have ruined their lives. As for the other girl, Madeline, the one whose boyfriend it was, the one who invited us to the party that may have never existed, well, there are only 2 options really. Either she was in on the whole thing and was actively finding drunk people to target, capture and rob with her boyfriend, playing the innocent, friendly and charming girl just to earn our trust, or she was innocent after all. If she was in on the whole thing, I find it terrifying that someone can befriend you and chat with you all night, all the while secretly planning to do such an evil thing. But if she was innocent, well, that means she's out there somewhere, either living with the secret of what happened, or not living at all in a hole somewhere, silenced by her so-called boyfriend. Whatever the case, I believe neither her nor her boyfriend have ever.
Alright.
I often wonder about what happened to her that night, and thank my lucky stars I was lucid enough to not get in that car with them all.
The village bus. Yeah, you could do that then. Get some horns.
I was 18 or 19 years old when this happened, still living with my parents in Billings, Montana. We were hosting a foreign exchange student, Faye, a girl from China who was the same age as me. Her English was pretty good, so we became friends. Now, I'm a guy, but there was nothing going on between us. She was more like a little sister figure to me, seeing how she lived at my house and all. Anyway, the two of us snuck out one night to go to this party. And we got home late, around 1 AM I think, and we both quietly walked up the stairs and tried not to wake my parents. Faye silently crept into her bedroom down the hallway, and I went inside mine and hopped into bed. I was so tired that I drifted off to sleep within minutes. I don't know what time it was, but I was awoken in the middle of the night by the sound of creaking in my bedroom. I woke up groggy, with my eyes tired from sleep, and scanned the room around me. The sound was coming from my closet door, which was slowly creeping open. There, emerging from my closet, was the dark outline of a human with a weird-shaped head. Now, I suffer from sleep paralysis from time to time, which means I often wake up with audio-visual hallucinations in the middle of the night. I quickly rationalized that the figure in my room wasn't real, and that the closet hadn't really opened. I was just in that place that's neither dream or reality. Even though I've had these experiences a lot of times in the past, it was still creepy to see the dark silhouette of a person looming out of my closet. I kept my eyes on the spectre as it slowly tiptoed to the end of my bed. It stopped, facing towards me, and began swaying from side to side. I closed my eyes, desperate to fall back to sleep and get rid of this nightmare creature at the foot of my bed. As I did, I heard its fake footsteps slowly backing out of my room towards the hall. Good. It would disappear soon, I thought. Then, I heard the sound of my bedroom door carefully being closed. What the? Something wasn't right about this hallucination. It wasn't like all the others. Every time, the figure would just dissolve and fade away as reality took over, but this one legitimately just exited my room. Now, sure that I was fully awake, I decided to get up out of bed. I walked towards my closed bedroom door and quietly opened it. There, standing in the hallway, opening the door to Faye's room, was the same dark figure. It wasn't a hallucination after all. It was a man, a stranger in our house, creeping into my friend's bedroom. I let out a loud, "Hey!" which of course startled the guy. He dropped something on the floor. In the dark, I couldn't make out what it was. I hit the hallway light switch on my left. The hall lit up. I could see him clearly now. His head wasn't weirdly shaped at all. He was wearing a mask, holding some sort of small club in his hand. On the floor by his feet was a small
A reflection. Oh, good
From
stuff.
inside her room, I heard Faye let out a terrified scream. She must have woken up during the commotion. The masked man darted down our staircase. In all honesty, I had no idea how to react. I just stood there like a rabbit in headlights, totally shocked that this wasn't sleep paralysis after all. My father came storming out of my parents' bedroom at the far end of the hall. I screamed that a man was just in my room and that he was about to go into Faye's. He rushed back into his bedroom, came out with his firearm, and made his way down the stairs after the guy. We heard the roar of a car engine outside. The intruder had parked his ride somewhere near our house. I heard no shots, no shouting. My dad didn't make it outside fast enough to catch the guy or spot his plates. To this day, we still have no idea who he was, If he lived near to us, why he targeted us, nothing. The only time the house was empty that day was around 2 p.m, meaning this guy either snuck inside while we were at the party and my parents were sleeping, or he'd been hiding inside our house for around 12 hours, biding his time. From what the cops think, he came to get Faye, to knock her out with the club, then tie her up, take her out to his car and drive off. Thing is, when he broke in, he hid in the closet in the wrong room. He stood at the end of my bed, trying to work out if I was Faye in the dark, probably thinking he should bludgeon me or not. I have no idea what motivated the guy. Infatuation? Hatred? Who knows? But the fact that he brought rope and a cudgel, and hid silently inside our house for what must have been hours, leads me to think his intentions were pure evil. Faye moved back to China soon after that. I miss her, but I can't say that I blame her for leaving. I mean, wouldn't you?
Sheesh.
This is a rather creepy encounter I had while camping with my older brother a few years back. He's 2 years older than I am, and this happened when we were in college. I was 20, he was 22. When I was a kid, both me and my older brother were in the Boy Scouts. We dropped out due to our time being taken up by sports and other activities. Nevertheless, we both enjoyed camping a lot, and as we got older, we planned weekend camping trips together. We lived in New Jersey, and we were always exploring the Pine Barrens, a 1 million plus acre pine forest that covers a large area in the south of NJ. Much of it's deserted, with a lot of unmarked dirt roads that crisscross the state. During the summer, people usually go off-roading, mudding, or dirt biking in the backwoods area, which both my brother and I did quite often. There are a number of state parks and campgrounds in the area, plus a few other more shady campgrounds where people squat for the night and make a home for a while. We tried to avoid the non-legit campsites, as there were usually some shady people around there. There are also quite a few abandoned ghost towns and sites here as well. Early 1800s settlements, iron and paper mills. Anyway, I was on this particular camping trip with my brother, and we decided to make a short drive and make a trip out to a few of our favorite ghost towns.
Hey, switch XAC.
During our Easter
Yeah,
break,
something like that.
so we had a long
How's it going,
weekend to
Sherman?
go and explore. It had been raining the day before, so we didn't really want to venture too deep into the woods. Some of the dirt roads flood easily, and we didn't want to get stranded. We visited 2 of the towns before the weather started to look like it was going to turn bad again.
Let's see.
We decided to find a place to pick up some food and headed off to a spot called
Yeah, here's the last story for this
the
one.
old ghost towns.
Oh, there's an actual picture for
It's just
this.
open cellar holes where some buildings used to be.
Alright.
This ghost town is
Good,
about
just
3
chilling.
or 4 miles
Hopefully you're ready for some spooks.
down a long, narrow dirt road we call Washboard Avenue. We call it that because the ruts in the road make it feel like you're driving over a washboard or rumble strips. The old town is located at an intersection where you can only turn left or right. If you turn right, you cross an old wooden bridge
What bugs
that
I
leads
got?
to the monument, and then back to the main road.
Thanks to
Turn
spooks.
left,
Yeah.
you pass the front of the ghost town and go
Good old
further
road
into
trip
the
of
woods.
spooks.
When we arrived at the town, we parked the truck off the side of the road and quickly set up our tents as the rain was
Reason
starting
I
to come down.
read our session of sleep.
After about a half hour, we finally settled into our tent and ate dinner. We were sharing stories and catching up on
Sleep's
our
already
days.
anyways.
We turned in for the night around 9:30 and both fell asleep very quickly. A few hours later, I heard my brother stirring and I woke up. I had to take a leak, so I got up out of my sleeping bag, unzipped the tent flap, and stood up. When I turned to walk across the trail, I looked to my left across the dirt road. There was an opening in the woods, and it looked like there was a figure of a person standing there. It looked like a rather large man, not fat, but tall and big. It looked like he was wearing a black trench coat, black pants, and a black hat. I didn't want to think too much into it since it was dark out there, and I was still half asleep. It could have just been a tree that had fallen, or just something that looked like a person. I stood there, kinda creeped out, finished my business, and went back inside the tent. I took one more look at the figure before I zipped up the tent flap. The figure was still there, and it looked like like it was now much further into the road. It was just creepy. As I got back into my sleeping bag, my brother asked me what I was looking at. I told him I saw something across the road that looked strange. What was it? He asked me in a whisper. I don't know. I think it was just a tree stump, but it looks like a person, I whispered back. Jesus, he said. I think I saw that too when I got up to take a leak. I was creeped the hell out. Yeah, me too. It was just standing there, right across the street. Very creepy. It's probably nothing, just our imaginations, he said. We both fell back asleep. Some more time went by, and I was awoken suddenly by the sound of the tent flapping. I thought it was just the wind at first, but as I gained my senses, it seemed too odd of a noise rubbing on the side of the tent. It was as if someone, maybe even two people, were trying to find the zipper to the tent, rubbing their hands up and down the side of it frantically. It creeped the hell out of me. I finally grabbed the flashlight, shined it in the direction of the noise, and saw a pair of hands pressed into the side of the tent from the outside. I let out a loud yell and threw the flashlight, which landed on my brother. He woke up and quickly sat up to see what was going on. As he did, I swear I heard footsteps, walking, thudding, but not running away from the tent.
Sound like a car.
What the hell? What's going on? My brother asked me angrily. People. There are people out there.
Wait.
What people? He asked me, still in a daze.
Nope.
There was someone, maybe two people out there. One
The
of them was
pepper
trying
ready.
to get into the tent. Okay, just calm down, he told me. Stay here. I'm gonna take a look outside and see what's there. Don't move. I want to see too, I told him as I sat up. He could see that I was shaken, and I usually don't make jokes like this. He started unzipping the front flap of the tent, and we both poked our heads out. We looked to the left where the truck was parked. Didn't see anything. Looked ahead to the clearing where the mysterious figure was standing before. Nothing. On the right, also nothing. At least, nothing we could see in the dark. Grab the flashlight, I whispered to him. I want to see what that thing was over.
It's not worth it.
My brother went back into the tent, grabbed the flashlight, and turned it on. Where did you see it? He asked. Over there, right in front of us. He flashes the light around the opening in the woods, but there was nothing there. Just a few tall trees and a few cinder blocks. Are you sure it was across the street? My brother asked. Yeah, straight out across the road from us. I don't see anything, he says, flashing the light some more. You mean on the other side of the street, near the bridge, right? No, right across from us, I said, pointing in the direction. Huh? Really? The figure I saw was on the other side, right next to the bridge, he said. Needless to say, we didn't see anything. After the initial shock wore off, we decided to get out of our tent and look around one last time before going back to sleep. We both got out and slowly walked around the tent, using our flashlights to look for anything out of place. We walked across the road to the opening, then down to the bridge, and finally back to the ghost town, looking into all of the open pits. Didn't see anything. We were both very creeped out at this point. We both got back into our tent and decided to try and sleep, agreeing to leave first thing in the morning.
He was green, man.
I couldn't sleep. 45 minutes passed, just lying awake, hearing more rain coming down, hitting the tent, and my brother snored. After 20 minutes passed, the rain slowed down to just a light drizzle. I was just dozing off when I heard the heavy footsteps again. This time, it sounded like they were running.
Oh,
I was freaked out, but trying to play it off like it was just a deer running through the site. Those footsteps, they were way too heavy. It had to be something larger. I listened for a while. I heard steps.
oh, they before.
And nothing. Then more steps. And nothing. As if people were walking past our tent. Then it got louder. This time, it almost sounded like tap shoes crossing the old wooden bridge nearby. I wasn't taking any chances. I shook my brother awake so he could listen too. He got up and poked his head out of the tent to listen. He said he definitely heard something that sounded like heavy footsteps, almost like whatever it was trying to lure us out. He grabbed his flashlight and shined it out of the tent, looking across the road, then down to the bridge. All of a sudden, he yells out, "Oh God! Oh God!" As he dropped the flashlight outside on the ground, he came back into the tent and shuffled through his duffel bag. I grabbed the flashlight. "Don't go out there," he told me as he grabbed something from his bag. It was a handgun. Before I knew it, he was firing off shots into the darkness in the direction of the bridge. He ended up firing off all the rounds before he zipped up the tent. "What the hell was that? What's out there?" I asked. "People," he yelled back. 4 of them. Black suits. He was almost hyperventilating. "That's what I saw. A man in a black suit, just standing there when I went out before," I told him. We both sat there for a good 15 minutes, trying to process what was happening. Who were these guys? What were they doing there? Why were they screwing with us? Did they follow us? Once we calmed down, I wanted to go back out there with the flashlight and see if the guys were still there. Ultimately, we decided to stay in the tent. Needless to say, neither of us slept for the rest of the night, and we packed up as soon as the sun came up. We both got out of the tent at the same time as it was bright enough. There were no footsteps in the dirt, no handprints on the tent, no sign of the men in black near the bridge, or anywhere for that matter. We packed up as quickly as we could. As my brother closed the back of his truck, I looked into the clearing and saw something black on a stack of old cinder blocks. It could have been a hat or one of the trench coats, one that those men were wearing. I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. We got into the truck and sped off. We didn't say much the whole ride home. I was too freaked out to even ask where he got the handgun, or why he brought it with him in the first place. Both of us haven't spoken about this event since. Not to each other, and not to anyone else. That is, until now. Hi guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Wow, can't believe we're on part 8 already.
Here we go to part 9. And close to the end of this.
This is part 9 of my American road trip series, in which I'm narrating one scary story from every US state. Make sure to check the other episodes out after this one. It's hard to believe we're almost at the finish line. Still, there's plenty more horror just over the horizon. So make sure to buckle up as we continue on our journey down Route 666. The speed painting visuals used in this episode were created by Victoria Skeller. Links to her YouTube channel and Instagram can be found in the description.
Instagram.
I'm from Asheville, North Carolina, born and raised, and I have my own story to share here. One that's equal parts bizarre and disturbing. Around 4 years ago, I was walking through one of the local parks early in the morning, well before anyone else was up and awake. I'd just broken up with my long-term girlfriend and was having difficulty sleeping. As I strolled through the empty park, I heard something that caught my attention. A soft whimper. Sheltered under a tree on my left was a dog. A black Labrador to be precise. The poor thing must have gotten lost, I thought. I leant down to pet the little guy, and his tail immediately started wagging like crazy. He licked my hand and made it clear, like me, he was in need of a friend. No collar, nor anything else to suggest he had an owner. What was he doing out here all by himself? Had somebody kicked him out? Was he a stray? I stood up and walked a few steps to look around for his owner, but the dog wouldn't leave me alone. He was like my shadow. Wherever I walked, he followed. Together, we walked the length and breadth of that park. Occasionally, I called out, "Hello? Hello? I have your dog here." But there was nobody around at all. No one was looking for the poor fella. I looked down at him and stared into his big brown eyes, a pair that said, "Please, take me with you." It seemed like the universe had thrown the two of us together. This dog was the answer to my newfound loneliness, and I was the answer to his. I took him home with me. For a long time, I did my best to track down his owner. I reported the dog as missing and put up flyers around town.
Man,
Nobody ever
that's
got
the wrong
in contact
combo.
with me.
No.
I found myself a
Oh.
canine housemate. I named him Scooby. Creative, I know. Every morning, I'd take
Scooby-Doo
for a
lab?
long walk.
A brown lab, though.
The first week I had him, we walked the exact same route around town. Thing is, every time we came to pass this one particular house, Scooby would stop and start crying. I'd try and pull him away, try to get him to keep going, but he'd just stare at the house and whine like crazy. Each time we came to pass that house, it'd take me a good 10 minutes to get him to continue on with me, tugging on his leash the entire time. After the 6th or 7th time we passed that house, it became clear to me that he was going to do this every time. So, in the end, I just decided to switch up our walking route. I had no idea what got into him, or why that house seemed to bother him so much. It wasn't like he was crying to go inside. He never tugged on his leash to get closer. It was more like he was afraid of something in there, but couldn't bring himself to leave. Like a human who can't look away from a deadly accident. He had some sort of strange, doggy fascination with the place. Anyway, for the next 6 months I owned Scooby, I took him on several different walking routes, making sure that we never passed that damn house that freaked him out so much. One day, though, I had an early morning errand to run, which took me past that house. I decided to take Scooby along with me, get his daily walk out of the way, completely forgetting about how he acted 6 months earlier. Well, Scooby hadn't forgotten about that house.
Uh-oh, texutre, please.
As we came to pass it, he once again froze in place and refused to move. He whimpered loudly, refusing to take his eyes off the place. "Come on, Scoob, there's a good boy," I said to him, trying to calm him down and coax him along a bit. It didn't work. He seemed more unsettled by that house than he ever had been before. "Hey, what's gotten into you, boy?" I asked him rhetorically. He must have stayed like that for a good 15 minutes this time, just staring and crying, refusing to budge. Then, without warning, he bolted towards the house, pulling his leash right out of my hands. "Scooby!" I shouted. "Get back here!" It was no use. Whatever fear had consumed him before, he had conquered it. He rushed to that house, ran around the corner and into the backyard. God damn it, Scooby, I thought. The owners must have a cat or something. And that's why he always acts crazy around here. I chased Scooby into the house's
Seriously?
backyard, completely embarrassed, praying that I could get him out of there before the owners woke up and started cussing me out. I got back there and found Scooby frantically digging a hole in the grass. I'd never seen him acting like this before. He never dug holes in my backyard.
Right,
I
I
tried to
took
pull him
that
away,
shortcut.
but he just shook me off and kept digging, his little paws throwing up earth, left, right, and center. I was furious with him. You see, Scooby knew something I didn't. Knew a secret that nobody else knew. He knew what was buried in that yard. His former owner.
Oh.
Scooby's digging unearthed the largely decomposed corpse of a 32-year-old man, shallowly buried in the garden of your average suburban house in North Carolina. The man had been down there for as long as I'd had Scooby. The authorities were alerted, and an investigation began. Turns out, the house was a rental. The dead man had been living there with his girlfriend and their dog. All their neighbors and their friends in the area knew them as Jim and Charlotte. These turned out to be fake identities. Everything people thought they knew about their lives and their pasts were a lie. The inside of their house remained untouched. nothing appeared to have been taken. As of right now, the police still haven't been able to track down the so-called Charlotte. She remains the prime suspect for his killing, though nobody's really sure if she was behind it all and went on
Oh
the
my
run,
gosh.
or if she herself was a victim too, buried somewhere else by somebody else. If she was responsible, then she left in a damn hurry, as pretty much all her personal possessions were still inside the house. Her wallet, her fake ID, everything but her cell phone. Whatever the case, no one has ever come forward to reveal either Jim or Charlotte's real identities. No friends, no family, no one. As such, Jim was reburied here in Asheville and given an unnamed headstone. The strangest part in my eyes is that the house's rent was still being paid when the body was found, despite the fact it had been empty for 6 months. The landlord had always been paid in cash, which arrived in an envelope through the mail. It was always addressed from Jim, even after his demise. So, the question is, who was still paying the rent? Charlotte, the girlfriend? Someone else who didn't want the new tenants to be digging around in the garden? That all remains unclear. I'm sure there are details the cops haven't revealed to the public, but still, it's a little weird. Scooby is still around to this day. He still cries whenever we go past that house, but he doesn't stop and stare anymore. In his own way, I like to think he found a little closure. I don't know how his last owner treated him or what he was like, but Scooby didn't want to leave him down there in the ground. He's a good boy.
Yes.
I'll update you all if they ever find the woman.
This could be best boy. Alright, what do I have here?
I've been listening to your YouTube channel and stories for a long time now, and I have one I'd like to share that happened to my parents a little before I was born. Many people in America aren't too familiar with my little state of Vermont, up in the northeastern corner, tucked between New York and New Hampshire.
3 claws,
You
2
are
more.
familiar with the
Okay.
portion of land in the southern part, known as the Bennington Triangle. This stretch of land has been home to 1 or 2 settlements, but is more famous for its unexplained mysteries, mass disappearances, unknown creatures, and evil spirits. Even the local Native American tribes say they'd never set foot there, as they believe the land is cursed. My grandparents owned a house right on the edge of Glastonbury Mountain, which is one of the supposed points of the Bennington Triangle. My grandfather had talked about unusual happenings in his many years of living there, but nothing is as chilling or bold as what happened to my father one summer day in 1980. It started out as any other hot summer day in August. My older sister was just turning 1 at the time, and my parents decided to have a birthday party for her at my grandparents' house, since my parents lived in a small apartment at the time, and my grandparents had a very large backyard to host the party. When it came time to serve the cake, my mother rushed about in the kitchen, looking for a cutting board or some other flat utensil to serve the large cake on. Alas, all of the boards she found were far too small. She hurried down to the basement, where my grandmother kept a lot of old kitchen gadgets and supplies. Perhaps there was a large cutting board of some sort down there. As my mother searched the dimly lit basement, she came across a corner where my
Come here.
grandparents stacked all of their board games for game nights. One of
I
the
guess
game
Ouija
boxes
board?
looked more than the others. It looked brand new. When my mum read the title, she kind of froze in bewilderment for a second. It was a brand new, never before used copy of the game Ouija.
Wow.
Why would the old folks have a Ouija board?
Who saw that coming?
Maybe they were using the box to store something else. Letting her curiosity take over, my mother grabbed the game from the shelf and pulled off the top. A brand new Ouija board stared back at her. At this point, her bewilderment of finding such an item diminished and was replaced with a thought. This board is the right shape and size to hold the cake. She was right. There were no creases in the middle like most game boards, and this particular model of the game used a very strong board, not flimsy cardboard. She started up the stairs, Ouija board in tow. Once in the kitchen,
They want
my
that.
mum looked around for some tinsel. She wasn't about to serve a cake to guests with a Ouija board fully staring back at them. Finding the foil, she wrapped the board up well, taking great effort to make sure all of the numbers and letters were covered. Slowly and skillfully, she slid the birthday cake on top of it, stuck in the birthday candles, and went outside and joined everyone. My father was standing with an old Polaroid camera in front of my grandmother, who was holding my sister, waiting for the cake. As my mum took out a lighter and lit the candles, a red light on the Polaroid began flashing. My father fiddled with the camera. "Oh, that's odd," he exclaimed. "I could have sworn I put fresh batteries in this thing." "I have a brand new package on my dresser upstairs," my grandfather said.
Oh, seriously?
"I'll go get him. Be right back." With that, my father ran into the house. And just then, a breeze began to whisper, and the bright sun ducked behind some very, very dark clouds. Looking up, my grandparents and my mum started to pout. "Rain. Looks like rain." My mother, who was born in New York City, was a tad puzzled by this sudden shift in weather, but my grandparents, being native Vermonters, weren't phased at all. After all, the saying goes, if you don't like the weather in Vermont, just wait a minute. Regardless, everybody thought it was best to move the celebration indoors. Once everybody was situated around the large trench table in my grandfather's dining room, my mother was beginning to wonder where my father was with the camera. All of a sudden, just as the thought was still in her mind, my mother, along with everybody else at the party, heard a very loud, very scary
Oh,
come from the upstairs bedroom.
scary.
It was my father. "Steve!" my mother shouted. Without hesitation, she handed the birthday candles to my grandmother, ran into the hallway and up the stairs.
Oh, thanks,
My
Brave.
father was laying on his stomach, a mere foot from the edge of the landing, his face down. He looked semi-conscious. "Oh my god,
Oh,
Steve,
it's
what
close.
happened?" My mother stooped to his side to help him to his bottom. "I must have tripped on something."
You put in the work, seems good.
My father sat with his eyes slowly opening, his legs bent, with his feet on the top stair. My mum looked behind him. There was nothing anywhere to trip on. The floor was completely immaculate, just the way my grandmother always had it. "You alright?" My mum began to help him to his feet. Yeah, I'm fine." My father was a 6'2" former Marine, 5 years fresh out of Vietnam. He fought and survived the siege of Khe Sanh and was a machine gunner on the front lines. He wasn't about to let a stumble dethrone his dignity. He finished standing on his own, shying from all my mother's aid, when, suddenly, he began contorting, twisting his shoulder blades back in an almost inhuman posture. "Oh, God! It burns! It burns!" My father started clawing at his t-shirt. His fingers gnarled and contorted in agony. Thinking he may have tweaked something in his fall, my mother, now horrified, helped him remove his shirt. What she saw terrified her to the bone. Between my father's painful convulsions, right in the middle of his shoulder blades, was a large, red boot print. Her rational mind tried to tell her that this was a reaction to a spider bite, but her eyes were showing her a more chilling picture. It looked like a man size 12 or 14, and there were tread marks, like actual tread marks. What kind of spider bite leaves tread marks? Someone, or something, tried to kick her husband down the stairs, narrowly missing the top of the landing by about 6 inches.
Sheesh.
Now, fully on his feet, the burning subsided, and as quickly as it came, the mark on his back disappeared. Both my parents took a minute to gather their thoughts before descending down to the party below. They kept their cool and played it off like nothing had happened. Immediately upon taking the picture of my 1-year-old sister with her cake, my mother slid the cake onto the table, cut it, served it, and then chucked the Ouija board, still wrapped in icing foil, out the back door and deep into the woods. After that, no other strange happenings ever occurred in that bedroom, and nobody said anything to my grandparents, right up until the day that they both passed away. It wasn't until years later, when my sister was 10 and I was 8, that we were looking through the photo albums with my mother, and we came upon the Polaroid she snapped at the table that day. Behind my grandmother and 1-year-old sister was the faded silhouette of what appeared to be a tall man, standing over the two of them, with his hands outstretched, as if about to grab them both. My mother removed the photo from its place in the book. How had she never seen that before? After we went to bed that night, she burned the picture outside in the trash barrel.
Okay.
This all took place in 1997. At the time, my girlfriend and I both lived near the Manistee River. We didn't live together though. We'd only been dating for a couple of months. Met each other at a local bar. One evening, I got a call from her at around 11 p.m. She sounded concerned on the phone.
Mickey.
Hey, Rick, could you come over to my place tonight? I figured she was just in the mood for a little late night action, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
Sure, babe. Feeling a little frisky, huh? No, it's not that. It's just that... Well, this is gonna sound ridiculous, but I think I saw some kind of wolf walking by my window.
Oh no.
Really?
A Wendigo story.
Or something. Well, I didn't want to laugh at her for what she had just said, but she was right. The whole thing did sound ridiculous. Still, I kept my judgment to myself, thinking she must have just watched a scary movie on TV or something. Freaked herself out a little bit. Being the reassuring boyfriend I was, I told her I'd be right over. I hopped in my truck outside and set off in the direction of her house. The drive took me about 15 minutes. My girlfriend lived out in the sticks a bit, in a house surrounded by woodland. A little too secluded for my taste, but hey-ho. I pulled off onto a road, which was flanked on both sides by tall trees that blocked out the moonlight. Luckily for me, my headlights were in great condition, and really lit up the whole road ahead of me. My truck comes creeping up on our house, and I turn the final corner to pull into a driveway. On full blast, my headlights light up the entirety of the house. Immediately, I see it. There, crouched in a bush by my girlfriend's front door, is what looks like a huge dog's head. That's all I can see protruding from the bush. Only the dog's head. But the thing was big. I hit the brakes. As the light from my vehicle hits it, the head instantly spins around and looks dead at me with a pair of crazed, orange eyes. Without hesitating, the dog-like thing stands up on two legs. And I swear to Christ, its body is human. No doubt about it. And it's covered in scratch marks and sporadic patches of thick hair. The worst part was its size. The thing was huge, standing much taller than any man I'd ever met. It charged out of the bushes, running straight at my truck like it was coming to get me. It all happened so fast that I had no time to think. I just blasted the car horn and put my foot on the accelerator, aiming my vehicle right at the damn thing.
There we go.
The creature wasn't interested in playing chicken though. When it saw my tires begin to spin again, it bolted left, and in a flash, disappeared into the tree line. I didn't wait around to check if the coast was clear. Instead, instinct took over. I jumped out of my truck and ran to my girlfriend's door. I knocked hard, but there was no answer. My heart began to race, thinking what this thing might have done to her. I desperately called out her name. That did the job. The door opened, and my girlfriend greeted me with a smile as if nothing had happened. I asked if she was alright. She told me of course she was, and that she was just a little spooked by what she saw earlier. The wolf man walking past her window, but that she was sure it was just her mind playing tricks on her. She obviously had no idea this creature was hiding outside her house. I wasn't gonna call you over here, she told me. It's late, and I know you have work in the morning, and I know you probably think I'm just being stupid. But I swear, after I saw the shape of the thing move past my window, I heard what sounded like whimpers outside my front door. Like a dog crying to be let back inside. That's why she didn't immediately open the door for me. Not until she heard my voice. I told her I didn't think she was being stupid. I told her about what I saw, about the dog-like thing hiding outside her house, waiting by her front door like some kind of damn punished pooch. Her face changed as I told her, became morbid and pale. I had to comfort her for a good few hours before she felt safe enough to fall asleep. In those hours, she asked me what I thought it was, but we both knew the answer to that already. See, there's a famous story in this part of the country about the Michigan Dogman. A lot of different sightings floating around. I've heard more than my fair share from people, both young and old, male and female. Since that night, I have my own story to tell about it. Some of you might think this is a load of bull, but I know what I saw that night, and I, for one, am a believer now.
Pop will get some. Okay.
When we were much younger, 16 or 17 I believe, my best friend James and I went out hiking in DeSoto Forest, Mississippi. It was 1985. School was on break, and the two of us decided it'd be fun to go on a camping trip out in those woods. We'd stocked up on supplies, got the best tent we could afford between us, and since James had a car, drove off one weekday afternoon. He parked up on the outskirts. We ventured deep into the forest,
Best
wanting to get
Arctic
as
wrench.
immersed into nature
Okay.
as possible. The two of us weren't exactly the most outdoorsy people in the world, so we wanted to make the most of the experience and really embrace the great outdoors. Learn from it, you know? As we were making our way along one of the trails, we heard people coming up around the corner ahead of us.
I just want that.
We were real far into the woods now, and hadn't crossed paths with anyone for a good long while. It was still daylight out though, so we weren't too bothered. When the people up ahead finally came into view and got close to us, however, that all changed. It was like something out of the movie Wrong Turn. 4 real, hillbilly-looking boys, far bigger than us. You could tell from the noise they were making, the way they were dressed, and the way they carried themselves, that they were trouble. Mullets, wife-beaters, soulless eyes. A real bunch of lowlife and mouth-breathers. Must have only had 10 teeth between all 4 of them. They stopped as they came to pass us, obviously looking for trouble. They started insulting us, calling us all kinds of derogatory terms. We kept on walking without saying a word, scared they'd do something. One of them snorted up a loogie and spat at James. They all laughed as we speed-walked out of their sights and around the corner. "Arseholes," James said under his breath. He didn't dare say it loudly enough so that they could hear him. And that was a terrible experience that really put a dampener on the whole day, but we figured that was the last we'd see of those scumbags. They'd had their fun with us, and were heading off somewhere to cause more trouble. After a couple more hours of hiking, we found the spot where we'd planned to set up camp. After putting up our tent, we ate a little dinner, and we chatted about life and the encounter with those lowlifes. Eventually it got dark, and we decided to turn in for the night.
Oh, no
We got
bangles here.
mats inside the tent, and after about an hour, we both drifted off to sleep. I was awoken in the middle of the night by some unusual sounds coming from outside. As the grogginess of sleep faded, I honed my ears on the noises. It wasn't any kind of nature sound or animal at all. It was quiet laughter and whispering coming from somewhere outside of our tent. The voices were muffled and far off, but I was sure they were human. Still, I needed a second opinion. I shook James awake and told him to listen. He too could hear the distinctly human noises. He whispered, "There's people out there for sure." He didn't say it right away, but I knew he was thinking the same thing as me, and that it was those 4 guys from earlier. "I do," I whispered to James. We had some wood carving knives with us, but that was about all we had for self-defense. James subtly unzipped the top of the tent entrance and peeked out into the blackness. "Definitely people," he said. "I can make out out their silhouettes. It's them. All 4 of them. They're in the bushes, about 100 feet away, I'd say. He said it all in such a matter-of-fact way that it didn't sound like he was scared at all. But then he looked at me with an expression of total concern. What are we gonna do? Just hope that they leave us alone? I didn't know how to answer. They were obviously planning something, but how bad that thing was unknown. We were outnumbered, outsized, and in unfamiliar territory in the dark. My heart was beating double. Let's go. Let's just get out of here and go, I said. We sat looking at each other, debating what the best course of action was. Then, whoosh, something flew in through our tent. It pierced right through it, and stuck in the ground no more than 3 inches from me. It was a goddamn arrow, sticking up in the ground. This was no joke. These guys were psychos. We heard them screaming and laughing like a pack of animals outside. Hit him again. Hit him again. That was it. We tore open the tent entrance and flew out into the forest, leaving all of our stuff behind. We heard the men howling like wolves on the hunt, pursuing us. God knows how close behind us they were. The 2 of us didn't look back. We sprinted deep into those woods, completely disoriented and filled with fear. At one point, James grabbed me and threw me down into a small ditch alongside him. He held me down. Shh. He whispered. I obeyed his command. He always knew how to take control, much more of a leader than I ever was. We stayed hidden down in that ditch for hours. I don't know how many exactly. Neither of us had a watch, and time lost all its structure. All I know is we laid low until daybreak. Then, with the light on our side once again, we slowly and cautiously made our way back out of the forest. It took what felt like forever, but eventually we made it back to James's car. The vehicle had been completely trashed. The tires had been slashed, the doors pried open, the insides gutted, looted and soiled. The outside was scratched to all hell, with a few holes put in it for good measure. This is one of those rare cases where hitchhiking actually saved the day. We were able to hitch a ride with a stranger back to civilization. Of course, we told our families about the experience, and ended up contacting the authorities too. They were concerned, but not surprised. Other people had contacted them about a violent and abusive group in those woods before, but they'd never taken things this far. Well, let me rephrase that. Nobody had ever reported something this extreme. That doesn't mean those mouth-breathing sons of bitches didn't end up hitting one of their targets. A bit hard to report something with an arrow through your heart, you know. The cops searched the area where we'd set up our camp. Our stuff had all been taken, obviously. They didn't find the arrow stuck in the ground in our tent. I guess the hillbillies took it back when they searched it. What the cops did find, though, was another arrow stuck in a tree, right by where we ran into the forest. They'd fired off another shot at us as we ran from them. Luckily, it didn't hit us. James and I never went back to DeSoto again. Never went camping again for that matter. If the cops ever caught those 4 guys, we never heard anything about it.
Darn kids. Bow and arrows.
This one isn't for the weak of stomach amongst you. I'll describe the incident and all its details, but be warned, this wasn't a pretty sight. A few years back, I worked as a first responder out in Oklahoma.
Oh boy.
A call came through one night about a traffic incident, a hit and run. Apparently, a cyclist had been struck by a vehicle, and things looked pretty bad. Somebody had seen the whole thing and called it in, but said it was probably too late already for the guy. If it wasn't, then it would be real soon. They were doing what they could at the scene. We rushed to their location, knowing that time was of the essence. We came down a quiet country road, trees lining both sides, and sure enough, up ahead in our headlights, we could see two distressed people and a third person lying in the road by a mangled bicycle. I rushed out to help, but instantly I knew the guy in the road was gone. He wasn't wearing a helmet, and blood and brain juices had leaked out all over the road.
I wear a helmet.
His limbs were broken and contorted at unnatural angles. There was a long smear of dark red where his torso had slid along the ground, turning the front of his shirt into a bloody rag and completely tearing off all the skin on his body and face. He must have been hit at some speed. I knelt down to see what I could do, though it was obvious to both me and my partner that this was not a survivable accident. I checked for a pulse, just to be sure, but really this was all just procedure. Just as everyone expected, I couldn't find a pulse. I got up to face my partner, who was doing his best to calm the two people who had stopped to help. My back was to the man lying lifeless in the road. I told my partner that there was nothing we could do for the guy, even though I'm sure he already knew that. He says something back to me, but mid-sentence, he abruptly stopped talking. His eyes got real large, as if he had just had the shock of his life. He was looking at something behind me. I turned to look too. Standing there was the injured man, though I have no idea how he was still breathing or able to stand.
Adrenaline, probably.
His head was split open. His face was gone. It was all just red. The only thing distinguishing him as human were the two wide, white eyes. They were filled with confusion and fear. Before anyone had a chance to help him, or even speak to him, the injured man ran off the road into the woods at full speed. We couldn't catch up with him. We called the incident in, and a search for the injured man got underway immediately. They never found him. His body was never discovered in the woods. Never has been. He was never reported by any of the hospitals. Nobody in the local community said that they'd seen a severely injured man running around town. For all intents and purposes, he simply vanished somewhere in those woods. Judging by his injuries, there was no way he could have gotten far. Still, he was never seen again. Never reported missing by his family, wherever they were. I know this must all have a logical explanation, and the man just ran off because he was dazed and confused from his injuries. Still, to this day, I have no idea where he went, where his body disappeared off to, or why he was never found.
I mean, there was that story
He was
earlier.
able to regain consciousness
It was
and run after
pretty
the
bad.
damage he sustained defies belief.
They were
And then again,
like not being alive.
it's a hell of a thing. Gave me the shock of my life.
Yep. Adrenaline is pretty much a superpower. Very dangerous one.
Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening.
Alright, next one. This is the last one. So once this is over, I think I'll call it the first stream. I know it's short, but just wanted to play with some spooks. It'll probably be like the last batch of spooks for a while. As I said before, spooks are nice, but it's not good to have so much negativity, you know? Nice to have some joyful stuff to listen to. Maybe next time we play Double Cross will be Jim Jams.
Series, where I've been narrating one scary story from every US state.
Maybe have more people playing
Make
with
sure
me,
to
who
check out
knows?
all the other
Probably
episodes
not.
after this. Thank you to everyone who emailed in their stories, and to all my supporters on Patreon for making this series possible. Ladies and gentlemen, the end of the road's finally in sight, so please, buckle up as we cross the finish line. This story takes place in Wilmington, Delaware. I'll start by saying I'm a female. At the time, I was 26 years old, and I lived by myself in a small house. My boyfriend had just dumped me and left me stranded paying all the rent. As such, I had to moonlight at a bar a few nights a week just to pay the bills. The bar itself was pretty great, definitely a job worth doing while you're still young. Most of our customers were just friendly Wilmington people, but occasionally you get the odd creep or drunk ruffian. Drink can bring out the devil in some folks. There was this one customer who seemed to come in every time I had a shift. A man in his mid-40s, stood around 6'1", I'd say. Went by the name of Dennis. He had a handsome face, but it was all wrinkled, and his obviously once athletic body was now a bit out of shape. He had a small beer belly and dark bags under his eyes. Drove an old, once white van, the colour of which had obviously faded over the years and turned cream. Always parked it right outside. I figured I knew this guy's story pretty well. Probably a bit of a lady killer back in his youth, but was now past his prime and couldn't get over it. Didn't know any other way to live. While all his old buddies that he used to party with got older and settled down, he never got out of the cycle. Kept on partying half the week. Some people can never let the past go. Dennis would always sit at the counter and chat with me. I worked there, and it was part of my job to be nice to the customers, so I of course let him. The first few times he talked to me, he seemed really friendly and a nice guy. As time went on, he became a little more creepy. He started making uncomfortable remarks and would grab at me inappropriately. I never made a big deal out of it, but made it clear that he couldn't do what he was doing. He always smiled and apologized, vowing to never do anything weird again. He never kept those promises. One night after closing time,
The big bugs,
I was walking back
jeez.
home by myself. It was dark, and the streets were empty. Plenty of side alleys lined the path that I was walking down. I only lived about 10 minutes
Uh-oh,
away,
texutre coming.
I wasn't too unnerved about travelling home alone. As I made my way down the dimly lit streets, I realised I could hear footsteps behind me. I looked over my shoulder, and sure enough, there was Dennis, keeping pace with me, with his hands in his pockets. I picked up my pace, and he picked up his. It was obvious he wasn't just keeping pace with me now, he was actively gaining on me. What his intentions were, I didn't know. I began sprinting down the road, with Dennis hot on my heels. I turned the corner and lucked out. Another passerby. I ran quickly over to them, and Dennis turned down one of the side alleys and disappeared. I told my manager about it the next time I had a shift at the bar. Dennis wasn't allowed back in after that. My next door neighbour, Jim, just so happened to be a police officer. He was a real nice guy, still is, and we sometimes chatted outside our houses when we met each other at the front doors. When I saw him outside his place one day, I happened to mention my new bar job. I ended up telling him all about my creepy customer, Dennis. Sounds like a loser, Jim said. You gotta shut guys like that down real quick. Make sure they get the message, otherwise they might never leave you alone. Yeah, I told him. I'm starting to get that now. He really spooked me though. I just didn't want to be rude to customers since I just started working at the bar. I really need that job, you know. Well, I'm sure he gets the message now. I'll keep an eye out for you just in case. We said our goodbyes, and I headed back inside my house to enjoy another lonely evening in front of the TV. About 2 weeks went by. I, of course, hadn't seen Dennis at the bar in all that time, seeing how he was banned from entering. I'd just finished a late night shift, and I'd made it back to my place safe and sound. I went inside, threw on my jammies, and hopped into bed. I'd had a couple of drinks while chatting with some customers there, so I drifted off to sleep pretty quickly. Next thing I knew, I was awoken by a loud commotion in my hallway, just outside my bedroom. It sounded like fighting. After honing my ears for a moment, I snapped out of my sleepy haze and jumped out of bed. I ran out into the hallway. It was my neighbour, Jim. Underneath him was Dennis. Jim was pinning him down on the floor. Call the police, now, Jim shouted. I didn't stop to ask questions. I just did as he told me. You see, Dennis had broken into my home while I was asleep that night. He'd used a quiet, glass-cutting tool in one of my downstairs windows. That's how he'd entered the place. He'd brought a sort of club with him, and a chloroformed rag was found in his pocket. My neighbour Jim just so happened to be awake late that night. He noticed a cream-coloured van outside my house, which he had never seen before. I never usually have visitors over, especially not that late at night. Remembering the story I'd told him, Jim became suspicious and wanted to make sure everything was okay. He checked the perimeter of my house and found that one of the windows had been breached. He climbed in after Dennis and caught him off guard. Thanks to his training, he was able to overpower Dennis. They searched the van outside my house. In the back was a mattress, along with 4 sets of handcuffs to restrain my limbs. Dennis wanted to drag me out to that van, and he didn't want any kind of screaming or resistance. You can guess his intentions. What I don't like to think about is where he was planning on taking me, or what he planned to do with me once he was finished. In all likelihood, the only reason I'm here to retell this story is because I happen to live next to a policeman, and that I also happen to tell him about Dennis and his van.
Scary stories, always very realistic ones.
When I was just a kid, my mother was driving through the middle of nowhere, Arkansas. I was in the back seat. Other than me, she was all alone. She took us down some quiet country road, lined on both sides by tall trees and thick bushes, very far from the nearest town. The type of road where hardly any cars go down. All of a sudden, a man came rushing out from the side of the road, bursting out of the tree line. He looked terrified and ragged, like he was running from something. He ran out in front of my mother's car as it approached, forcing her to slam on the brakes. She could hear him shouting something along the lines of, "Please, help me." He approached the car with his hands up as if to show that he wasn't a threat. My mother was tempted to get out of the car and ask what was wrong. She looked at me in the back seat and decided against it. The guy kept getting closer to our vehicle. With this being the middle of nowhere, my mum was a little on edge. She honked her horn as if to say, "Don't get any closer." Then she wound down her window just a tad and shouted, "Hey, what's wrong? What's happened to you?" "Please," the guy kept saying, "I just need some help. Can you help me?" What was this guy doing all the way out here by himself with no vehicle anyway? As he continued to approach the car, my mother could sense that something wasn't quite right. She took her foot off the brake and slowly started to get us moving again. That's when 4 other men came darting out of the tree line on both sides of the road.
Ooh.
They weren't going for the man in front of us. They went straight for our car doors. It was an ambush. They grabbed onto all 4 door handles and pulled. No dice. They were all locked. My mother put her foot on the gas and shunted the guy in front out of the way. Our car knocked him to the ground, and she accelerated down the road, with 2 guys still clutching onto the door handles of our car, trying to pry their way in. The car got too fast for them to keep up with. They gave up and let go. According to my mum, they all stood there in the middle of the road, watching us as we disappeared into the distance. That's the reason most modern cars have their doors auto-lock when they reach 15 miles an hour, to stop people from rushing your car and forcing their way inside when you're in the middle of nowhere. I'm damn glad my mum's vehicle had that feature. Thank God for car locks.
Ooh, did I get enough at the very end there? Hopefully get some as a reward.
For the past 15 years, I've been delivering groceries in Nebraska. A lot of our customers have been using us for a long time, though this story has to do with one household in particular. For the sake of privacy, we'll call them the Wilson family. For almost the entire time I've worked this job, the Wilson family have been using our delivery service. Once, or sometimes twice a week, I'll drop by their place to deliver their groceries. The mama of the house is called Marie. Her husband was called Tex. I ain't sure if that was his real name or not, but that's what he went by, and the guy was a real modern-day cowboy. Wore the whole getup, and always addressed me as cowboy. "Morning, cowboy," he'd say as he saw me coming up his driveway. "Catch you later, cowboy," he'd say as I bid him farewell. He always said this while bringing two of his fingers to his head, like a real cowboy would if he was lifting his hat or something. I always returned the gesture. We bonded over the years, and would sometimes get lost in conversation with each other. Real nice guy, Tex was. Didn't have the healthiest of diets, though. I could tell by his shopping cart. Seemed like the guy was living off bacon, sausage, and steak.
Oh, like a real cowboy.
Sadly,
You just need beans.
caught up with him in the end, and Tex kicked the bucket 5 years after I started delivering to him. I shed a few tears for the guy the evening I heard the news, and had a drink to his memory. Marie kept on ordering from us after that. For 9 or so years, I kept dropping by her place as usual, this time with a smaller haul of groceries than when Tex was still with us. A lot can change over 9 years, let me tell you. I got to watch as their 2 young sons grew up into teenagers, and as their house changed with the times. As Marie sold Tex's beloved motor car, and as her life went on, and she got married to another guy called Phil. Their haul increased after that, as did the number of deliveries I had to make to their house every week. Recently though, something strange happened when I made one of those deliveries. I came by their house as usual, only to see Tex's old car outside their home, looking just how it had years before, same paint job and everything. Marie must have tracked down the buyer and bought the car back off him. Maybe she was feeling sentimental and wanted to hold on to that piece of Tex after spending so many years without him. Who knows? I knocked on the door, and Marie answered. Strange, I thought. Her face seemed distinctly less wrinkled than I remembered. "Mrs. Wilson," I said, "you're positively glowing." She blushed a little and thanked me, then invited me inside to drop the groceries in the kitchen. "Got old Tex's car back, I see," I said to her. She let out a little laugh. "Did he tell you he sold it then? That ugly thing will be with us until he kicks the bucket." I was a tad confused by her reply, but brushed it off and put it down to the old woman's brain going a little gaga with years. Something else seemed a little weird though. The decor of the house. It was like it had been years ago. Old photos were strung up on the wall of the kids when they were much younger. All of the furniture was like the stuff they used to have in the past. My mind started darting around. Had she dumped Phil? Gone a little doolally or something? Was she trying to relive the old days when she was with Tex? I daren't ask. Didn't want to cause any drama. I walked into the kitchen to put down the groceries. Sitting at the table, eating their breakfast, were Marie's 2 sons. But that's the thing. They weren't teenagers. They were just kids again, like how they looked in all the old photos on the wall. Impossible, I thought. They must just be her nephews or something. She was just babysitting some relative's kids. But they looked so identical. They could have been clones of her children from the past. I put down the groceries and immediately made my way to the front door, not stopping to chat with Marie. Something felt off about the house.
This is poetry.
I didn't like it. I needed some air. "Leaving so quickly?" she said as I speed walked to the front door. "Yes," I managed to spurt out. "Sorry, I'm in a rush today. Have a good one, Mrs. Wilson." I reached the front door, which was still open, but something made me stop. I can't describe the feeling, but I knew I had to turn and look over my right shoulder, past it, into the living room behind me. I trusted my instinct and turned to my head. Sat there in an old, familiar armchair was an old, familiar man. "Catch you next time, cowboy," he said to me, raising 2 fingers to his head. A strange feeling came over me. Not fear. Warmth. I'd recognize that face anywhere. I gave Tex a smile and raised my 2 fingers out of respect. I then walked out the front door and closed it behind me. I looked out onto their driveway. Tex's old car was nowhere to be seen. Nothing seemed out of place, old-fashioned. Everything was as it should be. Back to normal. Back like it was in my time. I continued on with the rest of my deliveries for the day.
That's really weird.
I've made many deliveries to Marie since then, and nothing else weird has ever happened to me at that house. decided not to tell her about the incident.
Here we go.
That she'd think I was making fun of her, or insulting Tex's memory in some way. I've told my wife and friends about it. They all called me crazy. So, I'm sharing my story here. Does anyone have any ideas about what this could have been? I've been racking my head for months now, and still can't think of a rational explanation. Did I experience a time warp? A brain spasm? Some sort of glitch in the Matrix? I know I did, but I was completely lucid. Didn't have anything weird in my system, and saw and heard everything, plain as day. I don't know what to make of all of this, but I will say, Tex, it was good to see you again, cowboy.
Hey, Boatron.
There's a curse in my family that's persisted for the past 4 generations. To be honest, the thought of it keeps me up at night sometimes, as I know pretty soon it's going to start affecting me too. Back in the day, 2 men went onto native land in Standing Rock, North Dakota, and did a spot of grave robbing. One of those men was my great-granddad. By all accounts, not a nice guy. Neither was his buddy he went with. My ancestor was 31 at the time he did this despicable thing. I don't know if he dug up one person or multiple, but his get-rich-quick scheme came with some serious consequences.
Seems like it.
As the story goes, about a week after, he started complaining about a visitor. He told all his friends about this dark, shadowy figure that would follow him wherever he went. Sometimes he'd be sitting with his buddies, and all of a sudden, he'd go into a terrified frenzy, screaming about the shadow man outside the window. Nobody else ever seemed to see it. They figured he'd just lost his mind. He lived the rest of his days as an outcast, disowned by everyone who once loved him. Can't say I feel sorry for the guy after what he did. Unfortunately, the consequences of his actions have passed down the family line. You see, whenever any male in my family turns 31 years old, and I mean right on their 31st birthday, they all start complaining about seeing the same shadowy creature. They describe it as the black outline of a man, but with no facial or bodily features, just a black void in human form. What they all say it does have are 2 piercing red eyes. No mouth, no nose, no hair, just 2 red eyes that seem to stare straight through you.
Oh.
It happened to my granddad, his brothers, my father, and my uncles. They all suffered with visitations. My father still does. Sometimes the figure comes once a week, sometimes multiple times a day. There's no real pattern to the visitations. According to all of them, it just appears out of the blue at any time.
I believe it's
in
just
any
sharp
place,
claw.
at any distance. Its horrible red eyes looking right at you. It could be standing in the middle of a crowd, or alone in an empty field while you're out for a walk. You could move several states away, and you'd still see the damn thing looking at you through a window. It drove my grandfather insane. He lost his mind in his 50s. 2 of his brothers ended their own lives, citing the visitor as the main reason. His last brother ended up moving away and cutting all contact with us.
Aren't
Don't
you?
know what happened to him in the end.
Nope.
One of my uncles too has gone mad from paranoia.
Do I click on
Lost
that?
his family, his career, everything. He knew it was coming when he turned 31, but that didn't help him prepare. My other uncle jumped from a suspension bridge, said he'd had enough of the red-eyed man. Without exception, they all suffered from insomnia. The thing apparently came a lot more at nighttime, would stand at the foot of their beds for hours on end. My father, luckily, is still with us. I don't remember much of what he was like when I was a kid, but my mother tells me he hasn't been the same since he turned 31, back when he started complaining about the shadowy visitor. He's a real quiet guy now, never says much, and always seems to be on edge. I'm a male. At the time of writing this, I'm 29 years old. My brother is 27.
Oof.
As far as we know, there's nothing we can do to buy ourselves more time. We've chatted to a native elder about the situation. He gave us 2 small charms that he said to keep with us at all times to ward off bad spirits. I hope they keep the thing away from us. Or, at the very least, buy us a little more time. I'm a teenager who lives in a large town in Georgia, USA. Everyone knows everyone, and you can't go anywhere without seeing someone you know or waving at one of your friends.
Here we go.
It's relatively quiet, though occasionally bad things happen, like robberies.
This is the final story, it seems. So,
We've had a few mishaps happen in the area. Not the best
try
part
to
of
finish the
Georgia,
hammer set, and that'll be the stream.
but this incident was by far the scariest thing that's happened here. The day this happened is one nobody will ever forget. I know this sounds cheesy, but it was something that had never happened before, and that I pray never happens again.
I'm not sure I'm getting memory leak right now.
This boy, who we'll call Mike, went to a high school not too far from mine. We had the same friends, but never really knew each other since we went to different schools. He was quiet, nice, made good grades, a good
About
kid.
to... well, whatever.
Well, one day, Mike went missing. He didn't show up to school for a few days. When the news finally got around to me, I didn't know what to think. Maybe he'd just gotten lost on his way home, or maybe he stayed over at a friend's house and they went to stay somewhere for whatever reason. Mike's parents put out a missing police report. He was missing for a little over a week. His school and my school were connected by the woods, and they also connected to his neighborhood. Some of the other classes spent a few days going out into the woods and looking for him. A few days later, he was finally found. He was found in the passenger seat of a car in the middle of the woods, stabbed brutally several times in the chest and face, with a plastic bag over his head. How he had come to be like this was the act of a pure psychopath. A classmate of mine's, John, was not so great of a kid. Didn't make good grades and wasn't the nicest. John needed his computer fixed, and since Mike was good with that type of thing, he happily agreed to help John out. Mike was to meet John at his house, and then walk back home afterwards. Mike went over, fixed John's computer, and when he had finished, he started making his way back home. John followed him in his car, and John wasn't alone. They captured Mike, stabbed him, suffocated him, and hid the evidence in the woods. John was gored, and so was the other guy. It shook the whole town. Nobody knew that people around here were capable of such horrible things.
Alright, let me quickly pause this so I could explain here. So, Citra, its radio simulator, has a very nice thing called cheat codes. And there's a cheat code that has to look run at 60 FPS, which is why it looks so darn smooth. Also, I'm using an HQ texture pack that people on Huntserverse graciously took the time out of their lives to upscale everything from upscale and called extract textures from the Switch version of the game and add it on into custom textures that you can load in using Citra. This is a custom build of Citra that they also made. Big brain mode engage, yeah. I'm just you pretty much made it to like the end of the stream since, you know, listening to scary stories. And then this was the final one in the series of USA, the USA road trip from Shady. No, why did I say Shady? Lazy Masquerade. There we go. And this was the final story. I think it was coming to a close anyway, so I was just trying to finish an armor set. And I guess I'll be hosting a little bit. Yeah, AC's playing a heavily modded Skyrim that he's been working on for the past while, so I'll check out his work. So yeah, let's finish the story.
But believe me, you never know who people really are on the inside.
The sharps. Yeah, I got a lot. It's 4. Based on Monster Hunter stories. Actually, was that the end of it?
Hey guys, Lazy here.
Oh, it is.
Thank you very much for listening.
Alrighty then. That was the USA American Road Trip Stories. If you wanted the first part of that, you could either look at the VOD that's on this channel, or just, I think I uploaded the first episode on my YouTube's not too long ago. Acolyte, oh boy. Yep, just an Acolyte. Can you play Texutre online with others? Let me... Technically yes, but not on Nintendo servers. You have to do like a pseudo LAN sort of thing. Let me switch to record here and do the old display capture. So, see, click on this multiplayer tab, you do a good old browse game library. These are all the servers. I'm not sure how you make a server, but the Hunt servers has their own special servers that they provide if you were to join a Discord. I'm not really sure how to access that. You don't really need to go into a game that's meant for that server since it works all the same. So you connect that to that server, or you make your own. Then in game you go connect through a local connection in the game. So, the emulator itself will connect to something online, the game will connect to something local. Virtually. A virtual online. I'm just making it more complicated by my words. Massive rip. I wish I had done at 60 FPS on Switch. Yeah. I did play a crap ton of Switch version with friends, and I did a Solo Fairy Tier for a while, but I stopped, and now like, which my friends got the game, like, oh hey, this game exists. I should probably finish it and get the G rank, which I did with my friends. It's pretty nice. Do the island for hours. Maybe one day in the future, if Yuzu, aka Switch Emulator, gets further along, maybe that'll get to work. Because Yuzu does accept mods. I have gotten a couple mods working in the games I've tested in Yuzu, but Generations Ultimate, for whatever reason, it's based on a 32-bit architecture. Yuzu only accepts 64, and Yuzu devs aren't exactly motivated to work on 32-bit architecture, which wouldn't only make Double Cross or GenU working, but make another handful of titles working. Other thing I really want is a group named Pretendo. They are making an online custom server thingy for the Wii U. Simu, it is possible to play on legit Nintendo servers, but you need to rip stuff from your own Wii U. And what Pretendo's trying to do is pretty much just make it so that you can make your own files pretty much and make your own server. Because, undoubtedly the Wii U did do too hot. So online services probably are those days are numbered. And it'd be a real shame if, you can't, play Mario Kart 8 or Splatoon 1 or... I'm not really much of a fan of Splatoon, but I'm sure that a lot of people would really want to continue playing that game online. So, Pretendo dudes are working on custom servers, and they're far from completion. I think they're barely got some Mario Maker 1 stuff working, but good old quote, "It only works on my machine," is a thing that goes along with that. So, maybe in a year or 5 years, we'll see some good stuff for Pretendo, and hopefully we get 3 Ultimate working with Simu, because that's the main thing I want. I did play 3 Ultimate with my buddies Lumber. We played through the 3DS version using Citra. We played multiplayer. To the very end, we killed Diamborealis, and that was pretty much an end of the playthrough, because there's been a lot of grinding to do any of the other elders. It worked pretty well. Just, I worked decently fine at 60 FPS the entire time, but it didn't look that great. because didn't have the upscale textures, and there was some stuff missing that the Wii U does, like transparency and ice. In all your real fight, you get impacted by that. It was Glacial Igniter, because you could see him like diving through the ground. But that, I think, is apparently fixed now with the texture packs. Because the actor still technically moves on it, it's just not shown. The texture isn't transparent. Alright. Let's get that on back, finish the armor set. We'll call it there. So see what I'll... Well, armor set was already the main thing I wanted, to have guard, at least the guard +1. Might be able to gem some artillery, but I think I'm too early on in the game to get artillery gems or jewels. Yeah, it's gonna be real tough playing GenU on my Switch again. I'd already play it on my Switch with buddies. They want help in that game. I know for a fact one of my friends is gonna need help in the later G rank games, or quest rather. I've helped a lot of people get to G rank, a lot of friends. Some people would always need help in G rank, yeah. Then people always need help with that Diablo's quest. You try 7. That's G rank, it's EX. Ugh. Remind me. Bloodbaths. I haven't gotten that far in what's it called? And a lot of deviants. I think I really tried on Zeros, but then it was like when college started up, like, I don't have the free time to do this crap. So I did help friends get through some of the Astalos. What was it? I think it was just mainly Astalos. Astalos and Thunderlord, yep. The pressure goes up. I think I did stroke. Oof. Oop, that's the wrong one. What was I missing? Arms?
Oh hi, thanks for checking in. I'm still a piece of garbage.
Thanks for following me, dude. Much appreciated. Oh, I had this exact setting for Ultimate when I streamed it. Very tempted to do that again, but no one wants to play with me on Citra. Actually, not really them. My buddies is well, one, he's not really feeling like playing Mouse Center, but he's also waiting on XU Texture Pack, since there is technically one for this game as well. But it's not as complete. This game has weapons, armors, monsters, maps, text. It's upscaled, but the Ultimate one has mainly maps, and monsters and UI. I think so. I play with you on Switch. Yeah, I might do some community games in the future, but it's been a long time. I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm done with GenU. Like, there isn't much to do, which is why I pretty much just made a new file on Double Cross here. I got the army spheres for this? I do. Alright, there's my defense, 121. Operations. Yeah, I didn't think so. It's Guardian here. Conchu shells. Already had -9 constitution. I would need to get a Yeah, I need to get tasks in for that, and I don't think I'm getting that. This is oil lowering set, so I'll go 2 bunkers on it. But yeah, on that note, everybody for watching tonight's stream. Hope it was fun to watch. I'll see you guys tomorrow, in which I'll probably play more Double Cross. No spookies. It'll just be maybe, you know, as I was doing in the last like 10ish so minutes. I did that for the king. We'll see. I know one of my actually a lot of people are streaming now. Yeah, we'll be hosting Lumber, as I said earlier. I mute it. Okay. Who is playing Skyrim? Who is heavily modded. So yeah, give him a good old raid. Yeah. See you guys tomorrow. Bye. Oh yeah, I'm working on WTG. Oh crap, something like that. I should be done working on the Gunlance video. You know, the person we're raiding is the person who voiced that video. So yeah, I think I finished Monster Hunter 2 Dose, and hopefully it gets faster from there. Monster Hunter 2 Dose is always really hard to edit for. But yeah, if you're interested in seeing how the Gunlance screw over the generations of the games, check out the good old YouTubes. Till then, I'll probably watch a little bit for a little bit, then I'll knock out. See ya.